All right, I will call day 3 of budget deliberations to order. Looking for an adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you.
Any additions or deletions? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Carried. All right, CAO Howard.
Good morning, everyone. I believe day 3, we have to finish up some business cases and then the parking lot items, and we have staff available to speak to each one. So we left off on the community social needs assessment, and I will let Paul speak to that.
Good morning, Council. I'm going to present the Community Social Needs Assessment operating business case. The purpose of this operating business case is to conduct a social needs assessment to better understand the complex social challenges that exist in the community. Just some history on where this came from. On December 13th of last year, Council directed administration to submit a business case to gather the required data to better understand the complex social challenges that exist in the community. As you recall, the administration had been pursuing the development of a homeless strategy, and we brought back an update to Council in 2021 recommending that we halt any further progress on that, and that if Council was interested in better understanding the social challenges that we as a community face, that we would put a business case in for that study. And so that study is a community social needs assessment. The benefit of the community in conducting a social needs assessment is to really better understand the strengths and challenges in achieving overall community well-being. The city of Wetaskiwin has completed a study like this in the past, completing social needs assessments in both 2015 and 2019 respectively. Those in the past were led by FCSS, and typically municipalities conduct these types of studies every 5 years. The study that we're budgeting for is approximately $60,000. That number came from connecting with other municipalities that do these regularly. The challenges in completing this is typically these social needs assessments are completed by a city's FCSS. To date, the Wetaskiwin FCSS board has not been engaged on this initiative, and there's a likelihood that they may not have the resources to implement this study at this point in time. The opportunity for a study like this, though, is that the last one was completed 3 years ago in 2019. Completing this study will ensure that the community is focusing its resources in the areas that provide the greatest value, and that Council has a better understanding of the social challenges that the community faces. I can conclude my presentation and take any questions Council might have.
Go ahead, Councillor Billingsley and then Councillor Lonzo.
Thank you. Through the chair to Paul. You had stated that these generally are done every 5 years. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, municipalities that typically will do these every 5 years. Absolutely.
And the last one was 2019.
That's right.
In 2019, when the last one was done, what was done with the data? Who followed up with it, and where did that information go?
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, FCSS would have been an internal department at that time. That report would have been done at that time to assess whether or not the programming needs of FCSS needed to adapt or evolve. I wasn't here in the organization at that time. I would have imagined that FCSS would have used that information at that time to better ensure that the programming that they were offering the community aligned with what the report had said. I don't believe in sitting on the Wetaskiwin FCSS board that they're using this, the 2019 study, and they're just kind of up and running. And so to date, I don't believe that nobody is using the 2019 study.
And I guess that's my concern, is who will use this study, just because of the situation that FCSS is in currently.
Thank you. Well, that was one of my questions was the 3 or 5 years. And I guess one of my concerns is I know since 2019, the city of Wetaskiwin has made great strides in dealing with the social needs of our community. So I'm just wondering, we've made quite a few changes. I'm just not sure how many changes in the social needs assessment would be done from 2019 to right now. So I guess that's just one concern I have. And then also with Councillor Billingsley's questions as to what happens with it when it comes out. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through to Paul. Paul, I'm just wondering with the surplus that FCSS had, would any of that be applicable to move forward on this rather than returning it to the government?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, I would believe that the FCSS funding could potentially be used to support a study like this because it is preventative in nature. However, in having discussions last week with the government of Alberta in regards to the surplus, I am holding a meeting this week with the FCSS board chairs to better understand their surplus that they have and how they're planning to spend that. The agreement between the government of Alberta, our grant with FCSS government and the city ends at the end of the year. And so I've been in discussions with the government to ensure that all spending is 100% complete before the end of 2022. And currently the surplus faced by FCSS is pretty significant. So more discussions required to ensure that they spend that. The big challenge with this is that the FCSS board has not been consulted on this business case at all. And potentially they might not see the value in completing this.
And that's with the fiscal year, correct? As opposed to the calendar year. So that ends March 31st when this funding would have to go back?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, I have to ask that question of the government. I'm not quite sure. I know the fiscal year for the government ends March 31st, 2023, right? So
yes,
I just have to better understand whether or not that's the end of our fiscal year or their fiscal year for that agreement. As I understand it right now, it's the end of our fiscal year, December.
Thank you very much.
Any further? Okay. Red plate, green plate. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Blacks, we should have gotten you your plates to you.
Okay, next up, we have the Fire Services Master Plan. This is an operating business case before council to establish a long-term operational strategy for the delivery of fire protection services within our community over the next 10-year community planning horizon. This master plan would be used as a tool to evaluate and forecast both immediate and long-term emergency services needs of the community. History of a master plan is our community has never had a fire master plan. The objective is really to review and optimize future operations of the Wetaskiwin Fire Department to ensure that service levels, such as response times and future staffing requests and long-term capital planning are all aligned and adhere to the expectation of the community. Master plan would provide the Wetaskiwin Fire Department with an overarching guiding document based on a comprehensive analysis of community fire risk and community growth to provide recommendations around current emergency response capabilities, fire station location, staffing resources, deployment procedures, fire protection, education programs, apparatus, and related requirements and service agreements. This would also provide the business intelligence to our city administration and staff to ensure that our service levels and performance meet the expectations that the community is expecting in a most cost-effective method possible. So previously, the community has relied on the expertise of the fire chief and solely the fire chief and perhaps the CAO and the general manager to ensure that the requests coming forward at budget time meet the needs of the community. A master plan recognizes the complexity of the operations of a fire department and providing strategy for operations over a 10-year period. And so right now our capital plan or even our staffing model are based off of the expertise of our fire chief. And with respect to the fire chief, the complexity of when you might need a ladder truck or the next engine is more than just looking at what we have in our operation and saying that one's coming to its end of life, we need to replace it. As a general manager, I would like a lot more robustness and a study like this to essentially say when we come to council asking for a ladder truck or whatever it might be, that's based off of some solid planning, and the ability to do something like this in-house from a business planning perspective is very limited in that really it's running a fire department is complex in that you're looking at where your fire station's positioned, where the train tracks, what does that do to response times, what kind of staffing model might we need, and we've never had a study like this done before in the last 20 years. The budget we're asking for here is $60,000 to bring in a third-party consulting company that specializes in these reviews and provide a list of recommendations to complete so that our department can evolve to meet our community demands and needs, and that our response times are in alignment with both council and community's expectations. It should note as well that having a fire services master plan will assist with completing our grading criteria for the fire underwriter survey and should help the city to achieve better grading that may have a positive impact on business and commercial and residential insurance rates. So the risk of not completing this is that we face the risk of an unsatisfactory grade from the fire underwriter survey. My understanding currently is that our insurance rates in the community are higher, not just because we don't have a fire services master plan, but that is one of the factors. Assumptions and impacts, recommendations, again, from this fire services master plan would help evolve our fire department over time to ensure that we're aligning with the community expectations. I have asked Deputy Chief Plant here this morning, is he on the call? To just perhaps speak to the importance of this from a fire department perspective.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This is Deputy Chief Plant here. With this fire department master plan, it is very much a challenge right now with municipalities right now to associate themselves with the ever increasing financial costs. So we want to be able to have our costs in line and deliver a viable product to the community here so that we don't place any unbearing stress that we don't have to on the community for financial means, but we want to be able to move forward with a department that can actually suit the needs of the community. Basically, the strategic plan that they would be producing there would reflect a strong commitment to ensure safety, security, and a healthy community, and strategic goals that support the provision of the fire protection services to provide the value. And we also would be aligning our strategic priorities in the fire service to those of the guiding principles of council that are making the decisions for the respective future of fire protection services in Wetaskiwin. Is there any further questions?
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. Through the chair to Alex. In this master plan, will they also look at the training center? Will that be part of the plan as well?
Yes, that will figure into it. They will have a look at our training center, what kind of training we provide to our members here. They also have a small look into the municipal water supply to make sure we have adequate fire hydrants in the right spots, adequate water coming out of them. And everything around the fire department, make sure it is suited to the community and the community's needs. We don't want to overspend in the community, but we want to protect the community. So that's what this plan's about.
My second question is, as far as the $60,000, where did the $60,000 come from? Was there quotes obtained for this amount?
Through the mayor, Councillor Billingsley, we have not engaged any consultants or obtained quotes at this point in time. That budget figure came from engaging other communities of similar sizes that have completed these reviews in the past.
Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, either through to Alex or to Paul. If we had this done, what would be the saving in insurance if we changed our perspective on their scale?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, we haven't done that analysis or engaged the insurance companies or the fire underwriters to better understand that. Alex, can you maybe speak to the impact that this might have on the insurance rates?
We haven't had a fire underwriter survey done in, I believe, at least 20 some years. So we are due for that. And we want to be able to be prepared for when they come to do that. We don't want to receive a lower grade. So if we can come in with this master plan, it can provide us at least to a 10-year future of where we need to be and how to get there. And hopefully within a 5 to 10 year mark of receiving this, that we can move forward and get us a lower grade in that.
So just through to Deputy Chief, would there be significant enough savings that this would actually pay for itself, is where I was going with this. Would we save enough money to have a payback on the $60,000 within 5 years, 8 years?
I cannot answer that, as I've not been involved in a master plan like this depth before. And I don't know what our underwriter survey will say about either direction of it.
Okay,
It is possible.
Okay, that's a tough question. I'm sorry, but I
That
just
is-
was trying to
that's
get the
fine.
logic in my head as to why this might work for us. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, the last time I looked into this a few years ago, and one of the biggest impacts on the community is not going to be to the organization, but it would be to our citizens. Their insurance rates are higher here because of the low score that we have. So changing any of those levels of service or having this master plan is going to help our citizens.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, as you all know, Karen likes the plans and the idea of planning and where we're going. And when I was reading through this, I was surprised that nothing had been done in 20 years as we talk about safety being one of our priorities in our strategic direction. I don't think we can afford not to do this as we look forward into how everything is changing and the prices that are going ahead. So I strongly support this business case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, would there be any grants that might be available for this?
The mayor to Councillor Elliott, administration has not done a review to see what grants may exist. However, prior to going out for tender, we would do that work and ensure that we could get the lowest cost possible in regards to what grants might be available.
Thank you.
Anything further? Red plate, green plate?
Okay, next business case up is our firefighter mental health wellness benefit. Purpose of this business case is to provide an enhanced benefit for increased supports to cover psychologist, psychiatric, or clinical counseling services expenses for paid on-call Wetaskiwin Fire Service members that do not otherwise have access to city benefits. Just a brief history of how we got here. On December 13th, Council directed administration to cover that was January 10th, I believe. Council directed administration to cover psychologist, psychiatric, or clinical counseling service expenses effective as of January 1st, 2022 for paid on-call Wetaskiwin Fire Service members that are not currently city staff receiving benefits to a maximum of $1,500 per person per year after they have accessed the Employee Assistance Program. That benefit will continue for the remainder of the calendar year until the end of 2022. So approval of this business case would allow paid on-call members of the Wetaskiwin Fire Service to receive this benefit in perpetuity. Administration had responded to a notice of motion on this a couple of weeks ago to provide council a little bit of some additional information regarding this benefit. And as you note in that notice of motion, we have worked with Sun Life to provide a benefit for this and a health expenditure account, and Sun Life would be managing this externally for our organization. So the total cost of this is $49,275 annually. This is based on 30 members utilizing 100% of the benefit. And we noted in that notice of motion a couple of weeks ago that administration would keep an eye on that and determine whether or not we needed 100% of this moving forward, or more like 50% of it moving forward. But because we've never done a benefit like this before, we don't fully understand the uptake well enough yet to be able to provide that advice to council at this point in time. So I will conclude my presentation and take any questions that council might have.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So just want to make this clear. This will show up as a health spending account for the members?
Through the mayor, Councillor Billingsley, absolutely. This is
And-
health spending account.
And is it restricted only to this? Like for the, I'm not sure, sorry, I don't have it in front of me. There we go. For the mental health help? In other words, they can't use it on other things because $1,500 on a health spending account is a very large amount. I've never heard of anybody getting $1,500 carte blanche for a health spending account.
Through the mayor, Councillor Billingsley, my understanding is that it is open to more than just the mental health stuff. And I'm gonna have to look back to the notice of motion that we did a couple of weeks ago that explained that in a bit more detail.
Is there a way to have it so that this health spending, do they receive health spending account now at all?
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, no, they do not. Currently, our volunteer paid on call members receive EAP, like the Employee Assistance Program, and that's it.
Is there a way of being able to lock this down just for the purpose that it was intended?
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley, if you wouldn't mind giving me a moment, I'm just going to bring up the notice of motion where I provided that detail here. That'll be February 28th.
Just so that it's going on in perpetuity, not just, it was a one-time thing when we done it.
Karen, if you could scroll down to just the overview of the permanent benefit there on the screens. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so just this information was provided from our Human Resources Department. So the $1,500 will be provided annually to each firefighter and could be used to reimburse a medical, hospital, or dental costs not covered by provincial health insurance or under any other employee-sponsored health plan. This includes a vast array of items such as premiums you paid, for private health services plans such as health and dental benefits, services of professionals such as chiropractors, optometrists, or dentists, the cost of facilities and services such as drugs or alcohol addiction clinics, nursing home care, medical devices such as walkers and hospital beds for home use, blood sugar measuring device for diabetics, and costs in excess of plan limits for items such as eyeglasses or braces. It should be noted that this benefit is only for use by the volunteer paid on-call firefighter themselves. And the logic here is that the expanding the scope past just mental health would alleviate any concerns and provide a little bit more flexibility for the member to hopefully reduce the burden on that individual from a cost perspective, and thus having a more positive impact on their overall mental health.
Paul, so premiums paid for private health service plans such as health and dental benefits, does that include the psychologist?
Yeah, it would.
That was, so the intent of my motion was just for that. My intention wasn't to expand to chiropractors, optometrists, dentists. And I guess if there's only one way to have a benefit that covers all of that, my concern was just the psychological first aid.
Mhm.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you to Paul. So was this adding all these other things to this? Was this a direction that came from administration, or this is what the insurance company said that we could do?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councilor Billingsley, after a conversation with Alberta municipalities and Sun Life, this is what they came back to us with, is the ability to be able to provide this benefit while also administer it externally.
Okay. But was the question asked, or was it direction given to them? We're only looking for mental health.
Through the mayor to Councilor Billingsley, I know that's where the conversation started. The logic at the time that as to why, and maybe I'll just kind of read it out of the report. So the health spending account allows the employee to access the supports that meet their needs today, which can include mental health services, as well as an array of other medical expenses. Affordability of necessary medical equipment or dental visits can cause financial stress, which also impacts mental health. And hence, I believe why the discussion went a little broader there on this benefit.
So if it's included at no extra cost, then that's a bonus, correct? I would think. If there's no extra cost and it broadens the coverage, to me that.
This, like the scope, so the total cost was $1,500 a year.
Yes.
The scope wouldn't change that because it's the total dollar figure, not what it would be covering. Sue?
Through the chair to council, I think the other alternative that's noted in here is that administration could manage this internally. It's just more expensive that way, but we could specifically use the directive that we have and make it only for mental health services.
Councilor Billingsley.
Yeah, and this is we pay the $1,500 and then Sun Life takes 9.5% on top of that for administration. So there is no cost as per se, other than if they use the benefit, right? So
Okay.
adding more things just means it's costing us more money because they have more chances of spending the $1,500.
Yes. Agreed. And would a firefighter have the option to, okay, we're paying the base rate for them to add their family onto this if they don't have any other benefits, or this is just directly for the firefighters and we're not going to administer anything else?
Through the mayor to Councilor Elliott, and speaking with our HR manager, this is just for the firefighter themselves.
Right, thank you.
Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you. Through the chair to Sue. So Sue, you mentioned the other alternative was to do it internally, and you said, but the cost would be higher. Could you anticipate what that cost would be? I guess what I'm leading up to is when we first started this venture, it was intended to deal with mental health issues in support of our firefighters. if the costs of operating the program could be absorbed within the $1,500. So if we figure it's going to be X number of dollars, so it's $1,500 per firefighter minus $100 per firefighter to pay for the operational costs. Then we're targeting what the real factor was that we were trying to address. So any thoughts on cost?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So it was noted in the previous report that it would be about 42 hours. And we're looking probably somewhere around $2,500 a year for us to do that internally, just with staff time.
So it costs each firefighter about $80 of their benefit to have it served in-house.
No, I don't think we would remove it from the 1,500. It's just the staff time to manage that program. So they would get the full 1,500. And then on top of that, we would be spending close to 2,500 annually just in staff time.
But
Over and
as
above.
Councillor Billingsley said, there's a good likelihood that we would not have every one of our firefighters accessing $1,500
Correct.
every year. Thank you.
My question is to Sue through the chair. So you're saying if we did it internally, you're looking at about $2,500
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, that is correct.
thereabouts. And Sun Life takes 9.5%. Is that
Correct.
so? If it was max, it'd be $5,000. So it'd actually be cheaper to do it in-house if it was maximum benefit paid out.
Through the mayor to Councillor Billingsley. So that 42 hours per year, HR manager assumed 50% utilization. So if you go 100% utilization internally, you can double that. So it'd be about $5,000 internally
Which is the same amount.
with Sun Life.
Councillor Blatz?
Yeah, just along the same lines as what Councillor Billingsley is saying, I would prefer to see this done in-house and not as a health spending account. I think that the purpose of this venture was to try to mitigate risk and try to give services that are in mental health for people that need it. So with the firefighters that need the mental health benefit and they can utilize that, I think it's great, but I wouldn't want to see this as a health spending account.
Councillor Elliott, did you have your hand up as well? Did you have your hand up as well? Go ahead.
I have it open. Your worship, to all of council. With respect to mental health type related illnesses, history has shown that when you have an external organization administering the program, there's more likelihood that the participants will actually participate. There's a real hesitancy for any member of an organization to do that internally. So anonymity is very important for people to feel comfortable that their confidence or that their information is going to be kept confident. And that's simply because when you're working with an external organization, you're actually not coming on site for those services. You're actually going somewhere wherever their offices are if need be. And anonymity is very important in terms of helping people in this situation.
Paul, can we just narrow the scope? Can it just be strictly private health services?
To the mayor, I would have to have more of a conversation with our HR manager in regards to that benefit specifically. Sun Life, to be able to take on a benefit, will have their own requirements, right? And so we would have to take that away and have a conversation and then report back.
Through the chair, just a comment, I guess. It would appear through the conversation that we're not in opposition to supporting a mental health initiative for our firefighters. So whether it's done externally or internally, perhaps is immaterial at this point to the dollar value. So if we feel that the dollar value is important, regardless of who's administering the program, we should be supporting this and giving our administration an opportunity to come back and make some determination about doing it internally or externally based on the information that Paul's able to get. But the dollar value, I don't think is in question here.
Yeah, that's fair. Anybody else uncomfortable with voting on this based on that and the administration coming back with how they're going to do it as opposed to how much it's going to cost us? Okay. So the question then will be that we support the dollar figure and administration will come back with how they're going to do it in terms of just keeping it to a health, private healthcare, so psychological counseling, that sort of thing. Does that give administration enough information?
To the mayor, yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nielsen.
Tyler, I'd like to make a motion to go into camera.
Sure. Moved by Councillor Billingsley. Those in favor? Carried. We just need so going in camera for
Staffing issues.
staffing. Okay.
Yep. Sue to say.
Out of camera. Looking for a motion to come out of camera.
I would so move. I just want to get on the books. That's all.
Very, very terse. Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Those in favor? Carried. Smile, Trent.
There we go.
Okay, moving on to e-ticketing.
Good afternoon or good morning, council. With us today, we have CPO Sergeant Trent Yeager, who is here today to present the e-ticketing software business case.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So this morning, I'm looking at presenting this e-ticketing software for enforcement services. The purpose of this software is to bring enforcement services up to some efficiencies found with the implementation of technology within our service. This will provide the officers to no longer handwrite tickets. With that, it becomes efficient that they no longer have to handwrite them. Our administration doesn't have to manage them as far as entering them into our computer system electronically. And then also we can now efficiently transfer these tickets to the courthouse electronically, which aligns with the Alberta Government Justice Transformation Initiative, which is in phase 2, which goes online April 2nd. So with that, this solution, instead of operating our manual paper ticket process, we now can manage everything electronically. That aligns with the government one because they're switching to completely electronic ticket issuance as of April 2022. So with this, we look at a reduction of our watch clerk. So Heather right now has to manually input all of this into our records management system every time we write a paper ticket. So with this software, she no longer has to do that. It automatically will get uploaded into the court process automatically through this software. So with that, we'll find some efficiencies. Also, we'll reduce officer errors with this e-ticketing software. If there's any errors made on the ticket as far as boxes not checked off or information missing, this software will prevent the ticket from actually being transferred over to the court system. It'll get fired back to the officer for him to correct his mistakes and then send it off. So any questions about this?
Councillor Billingsley.
Trent, through the chair, in your cost, you've got $15,000 for the setup fees and the hardware.
Yeah.
And then you said it's $6,000 a year as long as we use the system.
Yes.
But then you've got a net budget of 21,000. So is the 6,000? So is the 6,000 included in year one? Is that how you?
Yes.
That 21 grand. So it is 21,000 and not 15.
Yes, it's 21,000. Yeah. So that's the first year, just purchasing the hardware and all that's required to transfer from obviously from handwritten to electronic tickets, because we still have to print off a copy for the person that we're issuing a ticket to. And then after that, we just have to pay the licensing fees after that, which is just 6,000.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councilor Nielsen.
Thank you, Trent. I just want to follow up with Councillor Billingsley because is the budget request for this year $15,000 to buy the hardware, or do we have to pay the licensing agreement on top of that in the first year for a total of 21?
Yes, so the first year we have to pay the licensing fees for all the licenses for all the officers as well
Okay.
as, yeah, there's some scanners and stuff that we were purchasing as well, so.
Thank you.
And there isn't funding in our automated traffic enforcement to cover this as opposed to going to tax or through tax.
No, Diana's shaking her head, so I'm assuming no. Again, I mean, that portion of the 15,000 could be funded from a reserve. Diana would make recommendations to council, and then the 6,000 would be the tax impact.
But even moving forward, why wouldn't this, like, so if we want utilities to pay for utilities, why wouldn't this also be the same thing? Why wouldn't this pay for itself?
Well, in the bylaws budgets, all their revenue does offset their costs. So it would essentially, once it gets added in and approved by council. It's not going to be full cost recovery, that's for sure.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Trent. Trent, with the $6,000 each year, that would include upgrades each year then, right? As the system improved, then you would get the upgrades as well without an extra cost?
So through the mayor to Councillor Elliott, yes, so it covers all the software upgrades, so the connection between the government of Alberta's system and our system, that would all get covered. Any enhancements that we want, so if we have a request, that cost will be covered within that 6,000. If there's any hardware changes, that would have to be purchased separately.
Right, but the software itself would be upgraded annually, or
Yeah.
as they upgrade theirs.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that would cover all the upgrades.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Nielsen?
Thank you. Through the chair to Trent or to Sue. Do you have office or administrative assistants in your department? And if so, how many people or what percentage of time or whatever?
So right now we have Heather, so that's our watch clerk. So we have her one watch clerk for the four of us. And then she utilizes anything administrative. So as far as our notices, any orders that we issue, she looks after that. She also attends court because we have first appearance date. So she's attending court for us as well.
So this is a 40-hour-a-week employee or 35-hour-a-week employee?
Yeah, she's a 35-hour-a-week employee.
So we now, when people phone in, they go to dispatch out of Red Deer. Is that correct?
That's correct for complaints, yes.
And then with e-ticketing, that's being done by the officers and then it just gets automatically upgraded into the database?
Yeah.
Would those be roles that person played in the past?
Yes, like currently she does do some of that work, yeah, ticket input, court packages.
So then as she's not doing daily picking up of the phone because it's going through to Red Deer and the officers are actually doing e-ticketing, are we saving administrative assistant time? In other words, do we have too much time as a watch clerk then?
Right now, we will be saving some, but right now she's over capacity right now. So this is to kind of bring her back down to 180 to 100% capacity.
Thank you.
Councilor Billingsley?
Thank you. Trent, is the 15,000 and or the $6,000, is that based on number of officers?
Yes. Yeah.
So if we add more officers or, well, I guess the 15,000 is the hardware based upon current levels, correct?
That's correct. There would be probably, depending on how we add officers, there might not be a hardware increase because that's all based on vehicles. So it would just be a minimal software increase if we added officers and gave them a new computer.
Thank you.
It's also based on computers too, not officers.
Councilor Lonsdale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Trent. The $15,000 initial required setup fees and hardware. Does that also include sufficient training for each officer?
Yeah, that includes the training to have us all trained on the system, as well as any travel time to install all the hardware, mounts, printers, scanners, all that stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Red plate, green plate?
Morning, Council. I have Wendy MacArthur on to speak about the airport master plan.
Good morning, Council. The airport master plan business case has been submitted. It was a strategic initiative of council that we do this, and we don't really have the staffing capacity to do it internally, so we're looking to contract it out. The objective of the master plan would be to develop a clear plan for long-term sustainable future airport operations. The master plan's recommended action should demonstrate operational and financial feasibility for the Wetaskiwin Airport's market location and suggest business development and growth strategies with the highest probability of success. The master plan process is expected to hire consultants, which will be expected to demonstrate the ability to develop an airport master plan through extensive stakeholder and community engagement, research and collection of data, and preparation of defensible recommendations by industry specialized professionals without preconceived assumptions and independent of the airport stakeholders. The areas of focus of the master plan would be alignment with the city's community vision and the city's existing economic and development plans and strategies, business development strategies, highlighting new opportunities and potential target segments, airport ownership, operation and usage, taxation and governance, and sources of funding recommendations. Plans for airport assets and capital infrastructure management and maintenance and sustainable growth. Assessment of airport capacity and resources and level of service comparison with other airports of similar comparative market locations. The master plan budget is $80,000, and it aligns with the community vision and strategic plan, as well as building strong governance, building the economy, and strong fiscal management. Is there any questions regarding this business case?
Councillor Billingsley?
Thank you. Actually, my question is actually to Candace. How important is this plan to economic development?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, I would say if the airport is a priority of council, it's very important in order to grow and develop and attract new business. It's important that we understand how we're going to grow and how we will attract them.
Thank you. Wendy, my question to you is on the cost of the plan. How was $80,000 come up with as far as an amount?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, it was based on other comparative airport master plans costing.
And how big of airports were those?
All similarly sized.
Okay, thank you. My concern, I think it's very important. My concern is following up with it, with the report going forward. If it's just going to be a report that sits on the shelf, it's a complete waste of $80,000. So as long as council believes that the airport is important and are willing to implement some of the ideas and suggestions in the plan, then that's fine. But if we're not, we're just gonna have a report that's gonna be out of date in 5 years. So I think it's very important to understand the ramifications of approving this. And if we're not prepared as a council to do anything with the data, then I would suggest not to do this.
Red plate, green plate. Oh, go back up again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That motion was defeated.
Defeated
Thank you.
by 3 red plates and a thumbs down.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
we've gone through all of these business cases. Are we allowed to go back to them or are we done now? And
We've got a parking lot to go to.
okay. The new municipal website, did we vote it down or did we put it in the parking lot?
I don't remember what's in our.
I don't either.
It was voted down.
Could I ask that it be put in the parking lot or will that go against what's already been decided?
If the majority of council would like to see that back in the parking lot, absolutely.
Should I speak to that or just,
Just ask if it can be put back in the parking lot.
that's pretty succinct. I'd like this to go into parking, in the parking lot, please.
I need to see Gabby's.
You got a white one.
It is not in the parking lot.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
What do we have in the parking lot?
One item that we have in the parking lot was with regards to the sidewalks, and that was the
Oh,
capital
right, yeah.
component. So council wanted to know whether or not, or, and I don't know, Sue, were you presenting the potential for the sidewalks rehab?
Yeah, so and engineering had looked into a para ramp program and I was mistaken. Neeraj has a lot of lists, but para ramps is not one of them. However, the manager of engineering had indicated that we would be looking at about $2,000 per para ramp. So if you assume 50 para ramps could be done, it would be an additional $100,000 this year. Again, the program is scalable. So in speaking with Diana, she said this would qualify for MSI and we could maximize some of the grant money that was still available to deal with that infrastructure. So the way that we have the rehab project worded is that whatever budget is approved based on how the tenders come in, we would maximize those budgets. So if prices came in lower than anticipated, we would just do more kilometers or more meters, I guess, of sidewalks. And we would assume the para ramps would be the same way. So it's a pretty fluid program that way and lets us, we have a long list of sidewalk rehab that needs to be done. And we would just add the para ramps to that tender.
Is there an appetite from council to get more of the para ramps done? And then we just direct administration to include those in the sidewalk rehabilitation program?
Just for clarification, not knowing terminology, is a para ramp the curb cut that allows wheelchairs to go up and down or strollers? Okay, thank you.
Clarification. Yeah. So are we adding dollars?
No, no. So you had how much for sidewalk rehabilitation and trail connectors, trail and sidewalk connectors? It's like 4 something between
Keep
the
going
two?
right there. There was 214,200. The other program was the extended, like adding pieces where it was not, and council voted that down.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, we did not, you did not want more infrastructure added
Right.
until our existing infrastructure was fixed.
So the goal was to move those dollars.
At the will of
Fixing.
council. If you want all of the sidewalk money moved to rehab, we could do that. We could also add in para ramps at $2,000 a piece. So, and again, there was some money left. Diana could figure out how much MSI money we had left. We could maximize that and do as much as council wants. I mean, if you look at the 10 years, we won't have enough money to do all of them, but we could do a big chunk.
So how much total are we looking at for MSI that is spoken for already, and what was left over for direction, I guess? Yeah.
$2,091,073 were left over.
2,091,000.
$2,091,073. Page 7.
So your worship to all of council, within the draft capital plan that was presented to council, there were two projects for sidewalks. One was the connectors and the other was the sidewalk rehabilitation. Combining those two projects would amount to 662,100. So that would be the upward amount if council chose to use that amount. And there is sufficient MSI dollars for that program. It would be just a question then of administration letting council know where the rehab would happen and how many ramps would be added.
I would like to see a 2/3, 1/3, 2/3 of it going back into rehab and 1/3 going to connectors or creating sidewalks where there aren't any now. Go ahead.
So 1/3, so do increase our infrastructure is what you're saying by 1/3.
Correct.
So not just fixing up our sidewalks and putting in
But
wheelchair ramps.
We had, you said 600 and something was, so I would say 4 something to fixing sidewalks and 2 something to adding the connectors.
Yeah. I
What,
can't-
what they had budgeted right out of that MSI,
Yeah.
six, whatever. My proposal would be 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 fix it, 1/3 create sidewalks where there aren't any that have the highest need.
I would like, I can't support that. I would rather fix the existing infrastructure before adding more.
Thank you through the chair to council. I was in great support of the sidewalk connectors to begin with, because I do believe, I understand that it is adding to our infrastructure and costs in that way, but we really do have a series, at least in the more public areas. Maybe we're not going into the residential quite the same way that the plan put forward, but things that include in front of the mall, that include down Main Street, to keep that connected for people in high traffic areas, I do see as important as adding to our infrastructure in those ways. And I don't think that it is superfluous. I agree with their arguments for everything that they put forward for those, and I don't want to go into that anymore. So I would completely support the 1/3, 2/3.
And can I include, sorry, can I include in that rehab of the 2/3, also making sure that we get a number of pair ramps done as well? That would be my hope, that that would be included with that as well. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment that similarly to Councillor Aberley, we have a lot of people who walk in our community, and with the price of gas going up, we'll probably have more. And being on the Horizons board, a lot of our people from Horizons look towards walking, and they're looking towards sidewalks. It's very challenging in the wintertime. You can't clean just a pathway. You have to have something underneath as a base. So just to support those who are walking and pushing strollers and using walkers, I would agree with Councillor Aberley.
Councillor Blatz. Counselor Blatz? You got fiber everywhere in town except for Counselor Blatz's street.
No, she's
She's
frozen.
frozen.
Okay, there we go. I am unfrozen. Okay, so I just wanted to echo Councillor Aberly and Councillor Elliott's remarks. I believe that it is really important to continue to add on to our infrastructure, but also keeping an emphasis on replacing our currently failing infrastructure. So I do agree with the 2/3, 1/3 and the para ramps, because a lot of the para ramps, especially in some of the older neighborhoods, are really deteriorating, and a lot of people are having problems with their walkers getting on and off the sidewalks. And so I think it's really important that we make sure we maintain those and also add them where there aren't any.
Can I propose a number for fair ramp? 25, if they're $2,000 each. Anything further? Red plate, green plate?
Your worship,
Yes.
just point of clarification, the 2/3, 1/3, is the 2/3 the rehab or the connectors?
No, rehab.
Rehab,
Yeah.
and then the 1/3 would be the connectors.
Correct, yeah. What was the total budget on the two? Six, what?
662,100. So then we would have 441,400 for rehab, which would include 50,000 for para ramps. And then 220,700 for connectors.
Okay. Should we see where you're at in terms of a tax increase or decrease before we conclude? Oh, yep, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, maybe you could clarify for anybody listening in about MSI versus what we just did with the business plans, that we can't use the money from MSI for these other functions. Just, we got 600,000, but we can't spend it here. Just,
All right, so MSI is a provincial grant for municipal sustainability initiative. Based on the funding formula is based on per capita number of roads or kilometers of roads we have. So we're able to use that for infrastructure programs. And right now, while it's an MSI fund, not an LGFF fund, we're able to use that for operating as well, some forms of operating. So this is a provincial grant that is has specifics for what it can be used for in terms of building our infrastructure. So this isn't something that we can use to pay for, no, we probably could, like, what are we limited to in terms of operating? Turn your mic.
Actually, I was going to propose that for the sidewalk connectors, we would fund that from the CCFB, because the connectivity of the community is generally acceptable under that grant program.
And just what is CCFB?
That's the Canada, it used to be the
Oh,
FG.
yes.
It used
The
to be the
federal
federal
gas
gas
tax,
tax,
yeah.
yes. And then the sidewalk rehab, we would fund from MSI.
So in terms of our ability to use that provincial and federal funding as opposed to it being added to the tax base.
Correct. Yeah, there would be no impact of that motion then on the tax base.
Diana, can you explain what we can use MSI operating for?
Well, MSI operating is primarily for actually what the provincial government prefers that you use it for is to subsidize your library contribution. That's the normal one. You can use it for your own operating expenses, but the operating component of it is when you talk to the provincial government and ask them about their increasing their contribution to the libraries, they'll say, well, that's what your MSI operating is for. So generally speaking, but we do not have to apply for or submit SFEs for that, for the operating component any longer. And the operating amount for MSI is only 88,800. So generally what we would do is we would just show that as part of our other or our provincial grants.
So could part of, I can't remember which. Like the e-ticketing software, could that come out of MSI operating as opposed to going against tax?
6 of one, half a dozen of another. Right now, the MSI operating is included in your annual operating budget as a revenue source.
But if it's earmarked right now as tax,
The e-ticketing, you mean?
yeah,
Well, what would end up happening is essentially you would apply a portion of the 88,000 to that e-ticketing instead of maybe going to the library or any of your other operating, so it doesn't make a difference. At the
okay,
end
so
of the day.
it's already,
Pardon me?
that 88,000 is already spoken for?
It's already in your tax base.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got the motion written. Karen, do you want to type it up? And then
I just meant we couldn't use it for studies and those kinds of things. That was all, just so that
Yeah.
people
and that's
understand.
why, yeah, that's what I was just asking about, the different things we could use it for. So the
Yes.
MSI operating is at 88,000.
Yes.
That is already included in what it's already being utilized.
It's in our revenue.
Correct. It can't be used for some of the other projects that we've looked at doing. Yes, thank you.
It's just that I've been asked questions and it's in an envelope and we can't take it out of that envelope and put it in another envelope.
Correct.
Thank you.
While they're typing this up, Paul, so one of the provincial boards I sit on is the Alberta Municipal Health and Safety Association, and they offer different courses for psychological first aid, especially for first responders. So it's through our WCB, and it's Alberta Municipalities Health and Safety Association. Looking for someone to make that motion. Councillor Nielsen?
No. I'm wondering, can these be broken into two separate motions?
Sure.
Thank you.
So just first motion will be the sidewalk rehabilitation for 441-4. to add a capital project.
Administration to add a sidewalk capital projects.
No, just right.
Add the word
I think
add.
that add a. Yeah, no, it's okay. Ah. Yep. Make that motion and then we can have discussion.
I would make that motion.
Moved by Counselor Nielsen, discussion. We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second motion. Counselor Lonsdale? Any discussion? Ready for the question? Those in favor? Just in favor and opposed right now. That's like it's an actual
Oh,
motion.
sorry,
That's
sorry,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Opposed? Carried.
Diana, do we have the spreadsheet to show them what the tax impact is yet?
What's the name of it?
Just to recap, currently we have a total tax impact based on council's decisions, which I'll go through just to confirm, of 10.03%. Beginning with the first one, when council deliberated on the grants and aid, there was a reduction in the proposed operating budget of 4,880 based on the grants and aid applications that council approved. The city contribution to programs, $34,160 had to be added because that was based on the current city agreement with the library, which basically indicates that the contribution will commence at the previous year. The increase to include tax incentives is $38,600. The biologic casework analysis that we added for the additional costs is $35,100. The cost of living adjustment at 4% is $444,000. The annual contribution to reserve, this is for the contribution compensation review, pardon me, would be to have it in 2023 was 50% of the cost of the compensation review, which was $13,250. E-procurement platform, $2,750. Admin assistant, the help desk for the IT was $53,600. The GIS Asset Management capital operating business case was $107,540. The economic development strategy was $80,000 for the study. The land use bylaw update was $40,000, and $40,000 was to be funded from the stabilization reserve with a further commitment of $80,000 from the reserve in 2023. Because the total amount would be 140, or pardon me, 220. The community development coordinator position at 82.5, fire services master plan of $60,000, and the firefighter mental health wellness, 49,270, and the last was the e-ticketing of 21,000. And that's where you're at based on the discussions we've had.
Diana,
Yes.
can we break out that GIS asset management, because it's got the 107,540 and some of that was meant to be funded from
Right, what we can do at this point then too is look at a couple of things actually. For the admin assistant help desk for the 2022 budget, we would prorate that for 8 months of the year, because by the time the budget is approved and we'd be able to hire someone, it's probably going to be May 1st in any event. So if we did that, the savings would be 17,867.
Karen, that's not showing in real time. We might as well just close it.
Yeah. Okay, and then for the GIS asset management, there's an annual component as well as a one-time implementation. And we've estimated the cost of the one-time implementation was 39,400. So that would reduce the tax impact if that 39,400 was funded from a reserve. So council could fund that one-time cost from the contingency reserve.
So what about things that are in the parking lots? Like we haven't nailed down the library, what we're going to give to the library and or other things that are they in there? Like
The amount for the library is the $504,400. That's the amount. They had asked for, I believe, 569. The 504 is the amount that's currently included in the tax requirement. And that's, as I said, that's based on the agreement. You had to start with what you had given them the previous year.
so that is the amount that was given last year was 504, and that's what's in the budget. So if we give what they're asking for, then
That would be an increase over and above
Thank
what
you.
we have here. Yes. We've also reviewed the solid waste and recycling budget, and that particular budget, we've got down to 100,000 surplus as opposed to, I think it was 132,000. And so if council chose to have that particular utility be self-funding, we've also calculated what the rate increase would be needed in order for that $100,000 not to be funded from taxes, but to be funded from the utility itself. So we can show that as well.
so in that, if I recall, there was no employee that was, had that been added into that cost center then? Because I believe under recycling, there was no employee being charged to that department.
Right, what we did is we did a complete review. In that particular budget, all of these salaries are in one area. So we can break out the recycling. However, I think there's going to be a continued review of that particular solid waste and recycling utility. And so at this point in time, we just left it in the same area. But we did, yeah, so it's in there. It's just not allocated through the budget process right to recycling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions one through to Kathy. Kathy, with the increased price in fuel, is that taken into account in the budget or do we have a contingency for that?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, at the time that this budget was prepared, obviously we didn't know the fuel prices were going to do what they're doing. So we would have to probably make some adjustments.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, Mr. Mayor, through to Diana, 1% is approximately $160,000?
Yes, 160,200.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kathy.
Also, we have discussed this previously regarding the franchise fee, whether or not council wanted to implement a 1% increase in the electrical franchise fee effective July 1, which would impact your tax to basically $85,000. And then we've also recently had discussions with the government of Alberta regarding the FCSS funding, and there is the opportunity that because of the amount of the surplus that they currently have, that the city may not choose to include the $84,300 for the 2022 tax year. So you could reduce your tax requirement by that amount as well.
Counselor Nielsen?
Thank you. At the very beginning of the session, I talked about a 10% tax cut, and I remember Councillor Elliott asking how I picked the number, and I said I just plucked it out of the air. But I think we're missing a really important aspect in this whole budget conversations, and I think a lot of it goes back to the number of reports and studies that have been requested by council for administration to do over the last couple of years, so we can get really good information and data to move our communities forward. And we just recently completed and had reported a facility assessment review. And Sue, just off top, how much did that cost? Do you know off the top, roughly?
For the review,
Yes.
it was 200,000.
So $200,000 we spent on a facility review. And earlier today, Councillor Billingsley asked about other reports. Are they just going to come in and collect data and collect dust, or are we going to act upon them? And so this is the launch pad for, I guess, my soliloquy here today. Based on the facilities report that we got, which we paid $200,000 for, it was suggested that we have $31 million worth of repairs on our infrastructure necessary. They also broke it down over 1 year, 5 years, and so on. They're suggesting the immediate needs in our community for our facilities is $4.1 million. $6.7 million in the next 5 years. In those numbers, the immediate dollars they talked about was at the Civic Center, $2.9 million. And in this budget, we put in 1 million. Manluck, they suggested we spend 103,000. We put in 94,000. They've indicated we need to spend 18,000 on City Hall. We put in nothing. The Civic Building, 209,000. We put in nothing. The multiplex, $402,500. This budget contains nothing. The RCMP building, $40,000. Nothing. The Memorial Arts Center, $67,500. We put in nothing. By the Lake Park, $181,200. We put in nothing. The airport, $32,000. We put in nothing. The West Fire Hall, $14,000. We put in nothing. The East Fire Hall, $5,800. We put in nothing. The needs that this report told us we needed to spend on our infrastructure this year was $4 million, and we put in 1.1. That's a shortfall of $3 million on our physical assets. I was able to pull the number of a minute ago of $2,091,073 on uncommitted grant funding. Because if we took that $2 million and absorbed all of it to deal with immediate physical building needs, we would still be short $914,327 to complete what this report, the $200,000 report, said we needed to do immediately. I don't know how we're going to sustain not only the 9% Diana has just suggested to us, but I'm suggesting there's another 6%, 7% shortfall to look after our capital physical plants, our buildings. And if we can say, well, we really don't need to spend $200,000 on the Civic Building this year, then why did we do the report in the first place? Or we can put off the multiplex for $400,000 because we know better than the people who did the report that we can put that off for another year or two. And maybe we can put a lot of these off. But I'd remind you that they're also suggesting next year, we come up with 6.7 million. So whatever we put off this year is going to be put into the next year's budget, which we don't have any money for anyway. The question I posed to council today, are we going to take the reports that we actually spend money on seriously and act upon the recommendations? or not? And I guess my final question is to Sue. Could the city or individual counselors, I'm not talking about as a group, I'm talking about personal liability as stated in the MGA. Could we be held liable, or could the city be held liable if there's a lack of action on these recommendations from experts on our facilities? If there was an accident or injury as a result of us not acting? That's my question.
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, administration and council are covered through our liability insurance. We would not be held personally liable so long as we have an asset management plan in place and we are funding it to the best of our abilities as we move forward. Part of the asset management strategy, we started with bringing a policy forward to council a few years ago, and we've been collecting the data ever since. And part of the request this year was to get CityWorks in place. All of the data that we've been collecting would then be put into that program and would become part of that asset management plan. There is not an expectation that 100% of every piece identified would be done within that time frame. There is a bit of a safety factor also worked into those reports, but it would be prudent as we're gathering this information to put it into that program, which we will if approved, and then bringing forward the immediate needs each year. And then the CityWorks would also give us the opportunity to report back to council what the next 50 years looks like and start finding funding strategies to fund that program. So there's not an immediate risk right now. If we continue to ignore it, there could be.
So the fact that we don't spend $4 million this year, we push it to next year. How does that solve our problems related to our infrastructure? I understand going to the community and selling them on cool things, additions to our community. In many ways, maybe an easier sell, but when our very assets, whether they be sidewalks, and we just had a lengthy conversation about sidewalks and the state of necessary repairs there. And on the 12 buildings out of the 20 some odd buildings we have, the report says we need to be spending $32 million. How many years can we lay this off before we take some significant, serious steps to address infrastructure? And when I talk about $32 million, I'm not talking about roads and other issues that are upon us. I would like to move that we add $914,000 of physical repairs as per the assessment to this budget discussion. And make it part, and that would push us to about, I think about 16% for a tax increase.
Moved by Councillor Nielsen. Go ahead, Sue.
Councillor Nielsen, just for clarity, is that on top of maximizing the MSI like you spoke about as well?
Yes, that would be using the full unfunded MSI dollars of $2,091, $2,091,073.
And then an additional 914,000.
Correct. Time to get serious about our issues.
Karen, I would just break them into two motions.
That would be added to taxes. The 914 would be added to taxes, and then utilizing the 2,091,000 would be using the remainder of the.
Okay, so just here.
And not necessarily, the motion wouldn't be added to this budget discussion. It would be adding $914,000 to the budget to address physical repairs. As per the study done. Assessment on, yeah. On city buildings. Does that capture your motion, Councillor Nielsen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Diana.
Just in terms of the dollars. So council, part of the $4.1 million immediate assessment is the ice plant. And the ice plant is 1.1 million, which we are already funding from MSI, and
Correct.
that's going to be done this year.
Correct.
In the capital plan, the 2022 capital plan, we have the facility asset management for the Civic Center, $1,053,600 funded from MSI. In the 2021 budget deliberations, there was a further 594,000 of funds that were capsulated from the 2020 year-end surplus to go towards the immediate needs. Of that 594,000, there were projects that were identified. At the time that the budget was approved, these specific projects were not identified. It was just to be determined. So I do have a breakdown of some of where that dollar, those dollars are going to be. There was going to be 92,000 for the Manelec Center, a further 402,000 for the multiplex. City Hall was going to be 16,000. By the Lake Park, sorry, pardon me, the water treatment plant was 112,200. The RCMP detachment was 36,000. The East Fire Station, 5,200. The West Fire Station, 12,600. And the airport terminal, 28,800. So administration has essentially put those dollars towards some of these immediate action ones, and they will be done in 2022. From talking to Ches just the other day, he has indicated that he would be doing these projects. Administration would also like to bring forward, right now that 595,000 is in your, I believe, stabilization reserve. And what administration would like to do is bring forward a motion that the amount of the dollars to be spent on the multiplex, which is, if you look at the entire amount for the multiplex, is about $405,000 that we would fund that from MSI. And then the balance of these smaller projects would be funded from that 594,000. So basically, to this point, you have allotted $2,747,000 towards the $4.1 million immediate action items. Okay, just to give you an update on what funds have been set aside and made available at this point.
And what do we have left in that, in our MSI right now?
Okay, now that's another question, because we've also, as I said, taken out the 1.1 million. And we funded 400, we just funded, hang on.
The 441,400?
The 441,400 from MSI. So I would have to do a calculation of what's left in the MSI before I can actually answer that question immediately, if you can give me.
Yeah, absolutely, because that'll have a bearing on this 914 motion.
Right.
Okay.
So can I have a few minutes?
Of course.
Okay.
So while that's being, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So Sue, then, if there's been $599,000 directed to these projects, they would not have been identified in a capital plan. They're a business case. They were just, how would I have known that reading my financials at this point?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So we had discussions when we were talking about the different facilities. If you remember the Public Works Facilities Group, and they had each building identified, and there's contracted services in each one. So we have a little bit put into a lot of buildings right now. It's nowhere near what is required based on that report. And so right now, Chez's team will take the report, implement what they can within the existing budgets until we can get all of this put into a system that will then come back and say, every year, council should be putting this much towards a facility reserve, and then we'll be pulling from there into the budgets. I think what's happened over the years is that we got really good at putting out fires, and we knew about how much we needed each year to put those fires out. That's what's already built into the budgets. What we will do moving forward is say, pull it all into one area and call it facilities, and then say, we need this much into the reserves to cover this amount. And we'll be bringing business cases forward each year to show you which buildings are getting done with which amounts or pulls from, because if we have to draw from the reserve, we need council's approval.
Would it be shown in this budget projects or money that was approved last year, the year before, on what was going to be spent? So if we had $599,000, whatever it was, approved in projects from previous years that were going to be addressing some of these infrastructure concerns, would that be reflected in this budget, or how would we be able to see that that's going to be happening from a previously approved amount or from a previous year?
You couldn't.
So you wouldn't see that? No.
And I mean, for example, I think it was 2 years ago, we did the roof at the airport. In the airport facility budget, there is X number of dollars for contracted services. They did it out of that. So that's how facilities has been functioning. And until we get a facilities reserve put in place, and we get all of this information put into a system that's going to be able to print out a report to council, we have those put out the fires budgets within that facilities section of the budget.
But as you say, we're still $1.3 million short
Absolutely.
of meeting the immediate facility needs.
Yeah.
So we could potentially take 1.3 million out of the unexpended grant dollars and tackle all of these projects and get them off the books.
Correct. If that's the number that Diana comes back with after her calculations.
Right.
Yeah.
But then there's been the suggestion that there be money set aside every year for capital repairs and replacement.
Right.
And so that would be another motion that we need to put more dollars into the budget for that.
What we would do is remove those ones that are in there. We'll do that all when we bring the facilities reserve discussion to council. So if City Works gets approved and we start to implement that, we would take the data that we collected on that report is in a form that would easily dump into that program. So we would have immediate reports on facilities. So then Ches would be able to go through this existing budget and pull out all those pieces that they're using right now and say, let's transfer this amount into the reserve. Then it would be removed from this budget. And there would be an ask every year to fund the facility reserves X number of dollars, and we would be pulling similar to the equipment pool. This is how much we know we're going to need over the life, and we're building up the reserves, and each year we would come and ask for X number of dollars to be pulled from those reserves to fund the repairs that are needed.
But in the absence of having that data right now, would we not be prudent to start a facility reserve dollar figure and add it to this budget? Like we know whether we're going to start it next year or 2 years, or we're going to have a facility reserve put into place.
Yeah.
And we're saying we owe $32 million on facilities. So by sometime next year, we'll think about, I'm being facetious here, we'll think about a number that we might throw out for a facility reserve. I'm suggesting that we should throw out an arbitrary number now and at least begin the process.
The problem with that is we did that last year. So we funded a storm reserve. We know we need a storm reserve. It's got no funding source. So we did a one-time transfer with a surplus and it's sitting there now. So until we bring that forward and get a funding source and an accounting of what all needs to be done and how much you should be putting, we're just throwing darts at the dartboard.
Right, I hear you saying that we know that we've got $32 million in infrastructure deficit right now. Whether we put $300,000 away this year or not, next year, we're going to have to put some money towards that regardless. So we're getting a year head start on what we need to address in our long-term infrastructure.
Kind of like an
deficit.
infrastructure surcharge.
I heard that word.
Yeah. What an interesting concept.
Counselor Billingsley.
Thank you. To Sue through the chair. Enlightening, but having said that, my concern is, do we have the ability to spend the money? Can we do the work? Can the work get done? And if the answer is like, because by the sounds of it, we're 1.4.
Well, if the numbers that Diana just gave us were still 1.3
Okay,
short.
so if this motion passes, whatever number, exact number it is, do we have the ability to spend the money and have the work completed that is done this calendar year?
Yeah, through the
Fiscal
chair
year.
to Counselor Billingsley, we do. So we would just increase the contract. We're handing this work out to contractors and we can just group them together. It's the same amount of project management from our end.
Thank you.
And could I add to that? It's just a comment. A wise lady in economic development has informed council, growth and expansion in this community comes from within, not necessarily bringing outside industry in. I guess the question I have, not that I'm looking for an answer, what portion of whatever we spend, whether it's $3 million or $4 million, could be done by local companies, and we put money into our own economy? And that I know would necessitate another conversation about core. But if we want to grow our community from within, we need to be able to spend our money in our community. And I can't imagine what would happen if we dump $4 million into our community in this next year. It's a comment. I don't need an answer.
Okay.
So I believe the question was with regards to uncommitted MSI dollars. If, as I indicated, administration does not bring forward the request to fund the multi-center or the curling rink from MSI, then you would have just over $1 million of MSI uncommitted funds remaining. If we do, if council does decide to use the 405,000 from MSI, then you'd have roughly 630,000 of uncommitted MSI dollars left.
So can you help me a little bit, please?
Yep.
Because the budget line on page 7 shows 2,091,000. So there's a portion of that that's been spent.
Okay, you're saying on, I'm not following which.
Well,
page.
no, I on page 7, it talked about uncommitted grant funding of $2 million.
Right.
And you're saying that if we spend the 400,000 on the multiplex, it would leave us.
625,000.
So what happened to the other million?
We've already allocated 1.1 million to the ice plant. And we've also, since those numbers were provided, there was 1.053. There was actually 1.7 million of MSI dollars that were used in the 2022 capital budget.
So the 1.1 million to the ice plant. That was for the second ice making.
No, that's just for the one ice plant, plus they're doing some upgrades to the second one to bring it up to code. So there's not 2 ice plants being done, just the one.
Right, but that wasn't part of the assessment. That wasn't a part of an emergency failure of equipment.
No, it was part of the assessment, but we
was,
had it
okay.
funded from reserves and Diana had suggested to council, you save your money, fund it from MSI.
Okay. So there's still 600,000. So that the number I've thrown into the motion is inaccurate.
Well, again, that's dependent upon whether or not council chooses to fund the 405,000 from MSI. That 405,000 has already been approved and is in the stabilization reserve. So if you do not make that motion, then you'll have over $1 million, in which case your 914,000 would be able to fund it, yes.
Some of the projects you thought weren't being funded are being funded.
Right. And that was why I asked the question, how would I have known that? Yeah.
So do you want to make a change to that number from 914 to?
Sure I do, but I don't know what number to pick. I mean, that's where I'm at right now.
Can you go through your list of what you had as unfunded or not as
Sure.
part of the budget, and then Diana can let you know if it's.
Okay, I had under the Civic Center, according to the facility assessment, 2.9 million, and we put into the budget 1.053. The Manlock Center was 103, we put in 94. The City Hall was 18, 0. Civic Building was 209, 0. Multiplex was 402, 5. I had 0. RCMP building was 40,000. Diana said we'd put money into it for the RCMP building, but we put money in for the renovations. Did we?
Oh, I'm sorry, just 1 second, I'm just going to do a double check. No, we have 36,000 for the RCMP facility. So.
And then on top of that, we had the renovations.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The Memorial Center, 67,005. And mine would show 0. By the Lake, 181,200. Mine would show 0. Airport was 32. Mine would show 0. West Fire Hall, I had 14,000 and I had 0. And I think you, Diana, said that there was money going there.
Yes, it's 12,600 of the 14,000. So what had happened with all of these approved projects as well is that they were prorated and not the 100%, they were adjusted by 10%. And that's where when the budget deliberations were done, 2,091,000 was totally pulled out of the 2020 surplus. And that included 1.45 roughly for the ice plant at that time, which was greater than what the final proposal came in at, but also this 594,000 that was put into the stabilization reserve. So those dollars are still in the stabilization reserve. If you fund the $405,000 for which is the total amount for that multiplex. That was what was the total amount. It was 402,500 for the multiplex to completely bring it up to current. So you can fund that from the 595,000, or you can fund it from MSI.
Right. And you're saying if we take it out of the stabilization fund, then it would leave that extra 500,000 in the MSI and unspent grant funds, which we could apply then to some of these other projects.
Right. And some of those other projects already do have some money assigned to them. The only caution I have is that with MSI, we cannot put forward a project less than 5% of our annual allotment. So basically, if we have a project, let's say here, the West Fire Hall, it's 14,000. We can't put that through to MSI because it has to be 5% of our annual allotment. And if our annual allotment is 1.3 million, the project itself has to be a minimum of 65,000. Okay, so that's where it's a bit of a balancing act in terms of how we fund some of these smaller projects. Also, after speaking with Ches, of the 4.1 million, he had indicated that some of that amount could be done through annual maintenance. So some of the smaller items that were in there, and there are, I haven't looked at the report. I understand it's a huge document, but there are some things like light bulbs and so forth and so on. So of the 4.1 million estimate, he felt that a portion of those could be handled through annual maintenance. However, we did not quantify what that dollar amount would be.
And so when I'm asked the question, what do I want to put into that number figure? I have no idea.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to you, I guess, or to Sue. The Civic Building is for sale, is it not? Yes or no?
It is, and that was one of the things I was going to bring
So-
up between the Civic and the Memorial.
So if the Civic Building is for sale, are we going to improve the market value by putting all of this money into it? And if not, then why are we directing any funds towards it at all?
Yeah, administration had not planned on putting any money into those, the Memorial or the Civic Building, just because the Civic Building is for sale as is. And we have supplied the Realtor with the report of what needs to be done in there. And then the Memorial Hall, until council makes the decision whether or not they're keeping it, we were not going to put money in other than the annual maintenance stuff that needs to
Wasn't there
happen.
87,000 or something for the Memorial Center?
67.5.
67.5?
But that's not included in that 595,000.
No.
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. Sue, I think. No, no, it's going to be Diana. So do we have, you stated it's $4.1 million of things that are needed now in the report.
In the report, correct.
Okay. And both the Memorial Center and the Civic Building is less $300,000.
I don't have the Civic Building. I do know that the Memorial Hall was 67,500, but I'm not sure how much the Civic.
Okay, so
276, 277.
so 350 thereabouts.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is, and you said some of the dollars of that 4.1 have already been committed in 2021's budget, and that was about $1 million. Is that correct?
The 2021 budget deliberations committed to the ice plant. So that's the 1.1 million.
But you had also said that there was like the fire hall was in, or sorry, RCMP building and some of these other things had been, dollars had been committed.
Right. That's
Total amount of that money is?
594,000 some odd cents,
So 600 plus the 1.1. So 1.7 thereabouts,
thereabouts, yes.
plus the 350. So we're about 2,050,000 or 500,000, sorry. So we're about short $2 million.
No, excuse me, plus the 1.05 million in the 2022 budget,
So
okay.
we're, okay, then we're short about $1 million.
just under, yeah.
Do we have monies available for that $1 million in reserves?
That, out of that MSI, was that eating up all of the MSI, or was that with the million left in the MSI and then deciding on what we spent that $430,000
No, I know. it's right here.
on? So we were left with 6.
So if you don't allocate MSI to the multiplex for the 405,000, that would leave you with just over $1 million in MSI. Or 600,000 with the 400,000 left in the reserves. So you could say that you do have $1 million available to you to fill the gap. However, 300 or 276 of that we don't want to do anyway. 67,500 we're not doing until council makes a decision. So that's roughly 350,000.
Mhm.
So if you took that 350 off of the million, you'd be looking at about 650,000 overall.
I thought I already took off the 350 from the math that I had here.
You did in yours.
Yeah, and that still left us about $1 million
Yeah, so I'm
required.
just wondering about the 405 and the million we have left in MSI. If that eats up or covers the $1 million that we're short in the work that we need to do.
So we do have monies available to do immediate needed work. And that's wonderful. My concern is, and that you had talked about That's year one of 4 million out of,
10 in the next 5.
right. Which is, we've now depleted, and as we all know at the table here, that our MSI grant funding is not going to go up anytime soon. Right? So we need to address that as well. That $1.5 million that we put away for infrastructure 3 years ago isn't buying the same services or renovations or fixing that it did, or that it will cost today, and certainly won't cost 9 months from now. So we've got a big hurdle in front of us, and I agree with Councilor Nielsen that we need to address that. I'm not sure if that 914 makes any sense any longer, if we can do that, but whether or not we need to start putting away more than $1.5 million in infrastructure surcharge might be something to take a look at. I'm wondering if we don't need to take a look and just say, whatever those immediate things are, less the civic building, less the memorial center, and get her done and pull it out of the reserves wherever it needs to be. And then secondly, take a look at adding to this infrastructure reserve that we're only putting $1.5 million away in 2017 dollars.
Which then adds to the 9 point whatever percent we're at now, or 10% we're at now.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah. See, and I support that. I think
The fixing this year will not add to it because we'll pull
No,
it out of
we've
reserves.
got it covered.
But adding to the $1.5 million certainly will. Of the infrastructure reserve. If we add to that, it will add to the taxes.
So then from a mathematical perspective, do I need to take my numbers off the table in that last motion and simply move to direct administration to use what available funds there are in the stabilization reserve and or the unspent, uncommitted MSI dollars to address the immediate facility assessment needs minus the civic building and the Memorial Arts Center. Oh, sorry, facility assessment. Immediate needs. Minus the civic building and the Memorial Arts Center. Sure, friendly amendments. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Minus the funds allocated, or minus the funds identified for.
The costs, right?
Sorry?
Minus the cost identified for the.
Minus the, yeah,
costs.
minus the cost, that's a good one, yeah.
So Councilor Nelson rescinds his first motion and then has this follow-up motion. Discussion. Yep.
In the 2022 capital budget that's been approved. There was $84,700 pulled from the infrastructure tax reserve to go towards the line painting. That was the only amount of 2022 infrastructure tax dollars that were going to be applied to any capital projects. Did you want to allocate funds from that, from the 2022 infrastructure tax towards this?
Not yet. See, and I think that's part of the next set of discussions in terms of we're at 9 whatever percent.
Is your mic on?
Sorry. I have the mic recognized.
Yep.
I think that's another part of the conversation when we get to, are we prepared to go forward with a 9 or 10% tax increase, or are we going to have to find dollars there, and where would they come from, which may include things like the line painting and so forth. I don't know.
Line painting had been identified though as our infrastructure tax, not, yeah.
But if well, that's been approved.
Motion on the floor.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, through to Sue, then I just will ask, what would be the impact on administration to fulfill this motion?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, the work that would be needed to be done in all the facilities is quite similar, so we would expand the scope of the contract going out.
So this wouldn't become an unwieldy task?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Diana, what is the impact then, or the difference between using the stabilization or our infrastructure reserve?
Currently, you have about 687,000 uncommitted funds in the infrastructure reserve. If council will recall, a motion was tabled to do internal borrowing. That internal borrowing was approximately 524,000, and it was proposed that it come from the infrastructure reserve because it was for infrastructure projects. And so that would leave you with minimal in the infrastructure reserve. Similarly, in that tabled item was a recommendation that 66,400 and some odd dollars be funded directly from the infrastructure reserve to pay for the city's portion of the local improvement on those same projects. So essentially, at the end of 2021, there would be no infrastructure tax dollars available. Okay.
For that, okay.
Right. The stabilization reserve, it's currently at 1.3 million. And that's because the 1.1 million for the ice plant was being funded from there. Included in that 1.3 million is the 595,000 for these projects. Okay. So if you take roughly $600 off of that, that leaves you roughly 700,000 in your stabilization reserve. Administration was going to recommend that of that amount, you might want to earmark $500,000 for your RCMP retro pay, should that become a reality of the municipality. Alternatively, 250,000 of that could be coming from the stabilization and 250 from the contingency reserve, because your contingency reserve currently has 1.5 million estimated at the end of 2021. And so again, you could fund the 500,000 or earmark it from the contingency reserve or from the stabilization reserve. So that would be up. Now, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You kind of did it, but that's also including the 218 that we've got in the RCMP operating to cover the remainder of what.
Right, yes,
okay.
that would be roughly 700,000,
Yeah.
depending on what it came in at exactly.
756 to 794, I think is
Yeah.
their range. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that's about, those were administration's thoughts regarding that anyway.
So as the motion stands, between MSI and stabilization, we would have the money to cover the money needed to look after the project recommended on our city buildings.
Yes, because you have approximately $1 million in MSI.
Right.
And so if you can leverage those dollars by combining smaller projects into a larger one, perhaps you can do that. But at the same time, yeah, I took off the 600,000 from the stabilization reserve. So it will be close, but you would be able to do it.
Okay. But then that
That depletes.
stabilization and our infrastructure reserve are done. Our RCMP operating would be done because we're looking after, this is under the assumption that we're paying for that, the back pay. So
Yep.
stabilization is next to nothing. Infrastructure reserve is next to nothing, which is fine because that's what we've got it set up for. And our RCMP reserve would be down to nothing as well, looking after the back pay plus the projects. Anything further? Can't see Gabby. Oh, okay. Connectivity. Ready for the question? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. What a mood kill. Go
Well,
ahead.
I tried to normalize it at the very beginning and it.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion. I'd like to move that council directs administration to establish a, I don't know, call it capital reserve, facilities reserve. Tune of, I guess to the tune doesn't really work, does it? In the amount of 1.5%. I'm pulling that number just out of wherever. And add it to the 2022 budget.
Clarification, it's 1.5% of what?
The tax increase, 1.5% tax increase. So calculate that 1.5 of $160,200.
Is this, do you have a time frame on it, a dollar figure you want to get to, or is this in perpetuity?
I haven't done any of that because I'm hearing from administration, they'll be coming back and making recommendations to us once they start pulling data into some magic program to tell us what's a good number to pick.
So right now it's 1.5 to 2022 period. There is no consideration to 2023.
Not at this point in this motion, unless you want to make an amendment.
Nope. Your motion is for 2022 period.
Correct.
Okay.
To get us started.
So if I could just make a friendly amendment. Amount of 1.5% tax equivalent to $240,300.
Just changing that 1.5 into a dollar figure.
No, you can leave the 1.5, but that is the tax equivalent. Okay.
Sure.
To a 1.5 tax percent, which is equivalent to the 240.
Just so that there's a dollar figure
Yeah.
going into the reserve.
Yeah.
And can I add in there, just for clarity, add it to the 2022 budget only? Only the 20, however you want to word it, just so that it doesn't look like this is going to be something that'll be ongoing. Counselor Billingsley?
But knowing the world of hurt that we're in as far as infrastructure, $1.5 million isn't going to cut it. And to stop it at 240 after, or whatever the dollar amount, isn't going to address the issues in 2023, 24, 2032. So
You can make an amendment saying that it gets to a dollar figure or for a length of time.
see, I'm wondering personally, if we don't address that $1.5 million and have something in there that because of the cost of living, that $1.5 million, like I say, was, I think, established in 2016 or 17. That isn't going to buy the same things that we're doing today, and certainly won't, as I said, won't be able to do the things that we're doing tomorrow, let alone $30 million worth or $25 million worth of projects. I'm wondering if we don't need to address that infrastructure and put it there as opposed to creating a whole new reserve.
My only concern about the infrastructure, addressing it through infrastructure,
Probably the same.
is the breadth of the criteria on the infrastructure. It talks about sidewalks and trails and all the rest of it. And if we're really talking about facility infrastructure, could we increase our infrastructure surcharge and then spend it on sidewalks? Well, I know there's lots of reasons to spend it on, but lots of things to spend it on, but it could be deflected away from facilities.
Okay, I'll buy that argument.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just our infrastructure fee is 1.5%. Is that correct?
It's no longer. We made it to $1.5 million and that was taken out of the increase.
Okay, so we don't have anything going into the infrastructure reserve. Yes. Okay, and then what goes into the stabilization reserve?
No, your mic, Diana.
But at this point, with regards to the 2021 year end, we are definitely not projecting a surplus. As a matter of fact, we're projecting a deficit.
Okay, so then what goes into the contingency reserve?
Just one second. I'm going to have a-
Well, no, I'm
Council did
trying to
get
get this straight in my mind.
council did get a handout with the reserve policy attached. So on day 2.
Oh, I was just looking at the numbers on the one sheet on the projection.
if you- If you look behind though, there is so stabilization. It says where it's funded from. What was the other one you were looking at? The
Contingency.
So I think that's on page 2.
Sorry, Sue.
That's okay. No,
There's a
that's-
lot of papers in here. that-
Contingency reserve is page 2 of 8. Talks about the purpose. And then the funding source is based on an analysis of the annual year-end surplus or any portion of the year-end surplus. Funds may be transferred to the contingency reserve. And then the stabilization had enforcement revenues, red light stops, or from annual year-end surplus.
So if there is no surplus, we're not going to have any money going into either of those two reserves. And then our infrastructure reserve will also be depleted.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. In 2022, in the operating budget, we have 1.5 million going into the infrastructure tax reserve. And in 2022, at this point, only 84,700 of that 1.5 million has been committed to the 2022 capital budget. So if nothing further is spent from the infrastructure tax reserve, then at the end of 2022, you should have approximately 1.49 million in there.
But it says the 2021 closing is $687,000 on that reserve page.
Correct.
But we're earmarking another.
We're earmarking that for funding the internal borrowing
For those local improvements.
for the local improvements.
And maybe I should clarify, when you said money going into the infrastructure reserve, did you mean new money going into it?
Yes.
Or just that we have that 1.5 million every year going into it?
We have 1.5, but will be no other monies going into it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So while we sit at a 10.03% tax increase, I will not support this. I will be looking at what's been approved so far and asking for that to be taken off. So I guess I'm not opposed to the 1.5% increase for a facilities reserve. I am opposed to it while we sit at a 10% tax increase. So looking for further discussion, or I will say we'll break for lunch and have the opportunity to mull it over. I was gonna say chew on it, but that was pretty cheesy. Anything further right now? Oh, then I propose we break for lunch and we will reconvene at 12:45. You, we will reconvene day 3 of budget deliberations. In front of you is the projection of the impact on our tax requirement with a 1.5% tax added to for establishing facilities reserve. We are sitting at 11.17%. Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. You had said that you weren't in support of this, Mr. Mayor, just because of where we're sitting at that 11%. Is it possible then, I don't know if it would be tabled or something to put into the parking lot then? Right? And then,
I mean, you can say you table it until we get through the budget deliberation. No. Go ahead, Sue.
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering if, after you decide what you're doing with this motion, if it wouldn't help if Diana went through the handout, and then as council made decisions to either fund from reserves or not, this number will change.
Absolutely. If there's nothing further, I will call the question. Those in favor? Gabby. Opposed? Motion is defeated. Okay. Diana, if you'll go through what you've just given us now, we can talk about funding sources and see how that impacts a tax change. Mike?
Thanks.
Gabby, you just need to say Mike every time that Diana goes to speak.
Somebody. Okay, your worship and council. So basically, starting at the beginning, we started out with the 3.68%. And the grants and aid gave us a savings of 4,880. We increased the amount that was in the budget for the city contributions to programs for the library because the library lease agreement dated July 19th, 2021 indicates that we have to, at the very least, start with the prior year's budgeted amount, which was 504,400. Then we increased to include tax incentives. Council has given, has a tax incentive program that wasn't reflected in the 2021 budget. So we wanted to ensure that it was reflected in the 2022. And as council is aware, the city is now required to pay for biologic casework analysis and our annual invoice for the next 2 years is 35,100. We've included a cost of living adjustment at 4%, amounting to 444,000. The annual contribution to reserve was the motion for having the compensation review deferred to 2023. So we would put 13,250 into the reserve in 2022 and then again in 2023 to fund the compensation review. The e-procurement platform, the business case was for $2,750. The admin assistant help desk was for $53,600. Administration has reduced that amount by prorating that position for 8 months because the position will probably not be filled until at the earliest May 1st. The GIS Asset Management of $107,540. There is a one-time implementation cost estimated at $39,400, which administration is recommending because it is a one-time funded cost that you would fund that from the contingency reserve if you chose to. So I can take that out of there at this point in time. And then if council decides that's how you want to fund it, I can add it back. What is your preference?
Okay. Starting with the grants and aid, we have a decrease of 4880. Anything with that? Okay. The city contribution to programs, that's the increase to libraries.
Correct.
Okay.
Just to bring it up to the 2021 annual contribution. So they've asked for more than the 504,400. They asked for 569,100, I believe. So then council would need to decide if you're going to maintain the 2021 level or increase in 2022.
I would propose we maintain what we have as opposed to increasing. Green plate, red plate to maintaining, sorry, any questions? Okay, maintaining our previous year's contribution to the library. So that 34,160 will be taken out.
No, it'll stay in there. It stays in there. That's that in the draft budget that was provided was an amount less than the 504,400.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
But we have to give them the 504.
according to the agreement, yes.
Okay. Sorry, that doesn't change anything.
No.
I was like, this is
Darn you.
it's always the mayor's fault. Increase to include tax incentives. Is that the
Council has a tax incentive bylaw, and that's to reflect the costs of the tax incentives that are being paid out under that bylaw. Plus, I believe there's a portion for the what's the Moose? Yes. the Moose
for
and-
taxes?
Yeah, and Legion.
Right. Moose, what's a hall on 40th Ave? Masonic, yeah, Masonic, sorry, yeah.
So these, through to Diana, Mr. Mayor, these are being paid now. This isn't money put aside for tax incentives for 2022.
No, these are actually based on the agreements that we have for tax incentives, this is the budget that we need to pay it out in 2022.
Okay, thank you.
Candace, does this include some of the facade grants that you have as well? No, this is totally separate. Keep as is. Green plate, red plate. Kept as is. Biology casework analysis, we don't have a say in. COLA. Go ahead, Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. I feel very strongly that this is an important cost. I'm quite worried about retention of staff. Even at 4%, we're not keeping up with CPI. And we certainly haven't kept up over the last 3 years, which I was a proponent for. And having said that, in hindsight, I feel I was probably in error or wrong on that position. So I am totally for adding COLA to this budget.
Councillor Blatz. You're muted still, just hang on a sec.
Sorry, that was my bad. I double muted myself. So while I completely agree that COLA is extremely important, especially for staff retention, I am also very concerned about how much affordability is costing our residents between the increases to electrical and gas, not by us, but that is something that is highly concerning right now, and how high gas has gone up and how potentially our water bills will be going up soon. I am worried about the affordability of our city right now, and for those who are just making it with their bills as it is. And so I would like to see COLA reduced to 2% as opposed to 4%.
222,000. That was what I was going to propose as well. I've talked to a number of other mayors and municipalities, and I haven't talked to anyone yet that is giving the full COLA or the CPI. I can support 2%, and I completely understand the need to maintain our staff and their wages. I also can't support a 9.67% tax increase either. So I would support a COLA increase of 2%. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is also a morale issue with our staff. And if we lose some of our staff, the average cost, the research shows it takes about $55,000 to retrain a staff to have them up to snuff with their job and its requirements. So I mean, it would just take us to lose 4 staff, and there's our $220,000. And I agree that the 9% tax increase is way too high, but at the same time, our staff are providing very good service to our community. Our citizens are very well looked after, and they haven't had a COLA increase in the last 3 years, correct?
They also had we did a wage survey bringing up the average to 50%, or their wages up to 50%.
Yeah, 50% of the rest of the comparators.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Comment on Councillor Blatz's comment about increase to utilities, which are not in our control. I totally get. But if we reduce our employees, sorry, if we don't increase their wages by the 4%, they're even going to be further behind on being able to afford those type of costs. I'm not for a 9.67% increase either. I'm wondering if there's other ways of finding those dollars and still be able to give the COLA to our employees. So like I say, I'm in full favor of the 444 and finding other avenues to reduce our tax increase.
Councillor Aberley.
Thank you through the chair to council. I've been speaking against the market survey proposal that was up, and I know that isn't on there, but for me, that was under the understanding when I was doing that we were, and I know it changes, but I am in support of the cost of living adjustment as it is, because we learned that we're not paying the staff to the levels that their peers are throughout the province. And again, I would like to find it somewhere else and continue to show the staff that we are supporting this very basic minimum for them. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I myself as well, I have a very hard time supporting the 4% at where we're sitting at right now. But I also agree with Councillor Billingsley that we've held pretty firm and steady over the last 3 years. You know, like we've always talked about recruiting people, but as Councillor Billingsley mentioned too, staff retention and morale. So even though we're sitting where we're sitting, I will be in support of this.
Anything further? Red plate, green plate? Annual contribution to reserve. It was thumbs up, sorry. Any discussion? Red plate, green plate. 1, 2, 3. I can't see Gabby.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, that's thumbs up. E-procurement platform. Any discussion? Red plate, green plate. Okay. It didn't matter. I had enough. You do matter, Gabby. Admin assistant help desk. Any discussion? Red plate, green plate. Oh, Councillor Lonsdale. GIS Asset Management. Any discussion? Red plate, green plate.
That was a thumbs up.
That was a thumbs up, yeah.
Thank
you. ECDev strategy. Any discussion? Yep.
We've through our strategic plan that we're working on, we have identified that economic development was very big and a very large, a big priority and very important to us. So I would hope that this stays in.
Councilor Nielsen.
Just for clarification here, if I were to go back one to GIS, when we voted for the concept of GIS. It says it could be funded from contingency, which would not have an impact on the tax rate, correct, Diana?
No, your worship, through to Councillor Nielsen. The 107,540 is the total impact, but of that, there's a one-time cost of 39,400. And that's what we're proposing funding from a contingency reserve, because the balance of the amount would be continuous year after year in the tax base.
Okay, in terms of the economic development strategy, funded from where?
Council can choose to fund that from the contingency reserve if you chose. There's just a note there, fund from contingency reserve, should had a question mark behind it. So if you want to do that, we can certainly reduce the 80,000 to zero impact on taxes by funding it from contingency.
And could you remind me again, what's in the contingency reserve?
I believe it was 1.5 million. But
Less some of the monies that we talked about for infrastructure, is that correct? Depending if
That was coming from stabilization.
all of it?
I don't think we had anything
MSI and state.
Okay, so then we still have monies there.
from
Okay.
our own reserves. Yeah, the only one we were using was stabilization.
Can I,
So yeah, it was 1.5 million, but there is 105,722 committed out of that already from prior years. So you'd be looking at roughly 1.4 million.
can I propose that we pull the money from contingency?
Speak to that then, before we decide whether we're keeping it or not.
It's just, we got to find ways of getting from.
Sorry, not you speaking to it. We'll vote on whether it's going to come from contingency and then we'll vote on whether we're.
Fair
keeping it.
enough.
Yeah. So on contingency. And then to keeping it. ECDEV strategy. So we'll vote on whether it comes from contingency. Right now, it's the option, right, Diana, that it can come from contingency, or is that where the funding is?
No, it's the option. I thought you already voted for that.
That's what.
Yeah, we will. I just didn't know how you had it in here.
Oh,
whether-
right. Yeah, in there I didn't, but I've updated it
Okay.
to show it coming from contingency.
I thought that's what we just voted for.
For the, I thought this was for the GIS asset management.
No.
No,
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, just so I'm clear, for the GIS asset management, 39.4 is coming from contingency and the 107 is coming from tax.
the difference between the two will be
Okay.
coming from tax. So roughly 68,000 will be coming from tax.
Okay, and right now, ECDEV strategy is approved, but coming from contingency.
Correct.
Okay. Land use bylaw. Right now, it's funded through stabilization and going forward from, sorry, funded from stabilization. And then reserves following that. So right now, this doesn't have a tax.
Correct.
Okay. So land use bylaw. Community Development Coordinator. Any discussion? Councillor Billingsley. Or sorry, Councillor Elliott.
You're as bad as Paul. Mr. Mayor, through to Paul. Paul, this person is is in place till the 31st of March. And then the contract would start again if this was approved. Is that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Elliott. Thanks to the mayor. We have a grant from the government of Alberta to help fund a staff position to help offset a lot of the work that is going into supporting the shelter being run by the Mustard Seed. And so at the end of March, as is the current agreement, that position would end. The funding for that position would end, and then we would have no supports in place. Caveat is I am speaking with the government of Alberta about the government of Alberta is speaking about an extension to the shelter, and we will provide an update to council on Monday. And I am, my position with the government is that if they want the city to continue to be involved in that, we also need the staffing portion of that grant to be approved. So there's other balls in play. We could see an extension of those grant monies for a period of time. And at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure how long that might be. It could be until the end of March and nothing more.
But it could also, if this were left in the budget and we approve this, it would only be for 3/4 of the year. It would not be for the first quarter. So it'd be like the other position, correct? So it wouldn't be that full amount. It would be 0.75 of that amount.
I will defer to administration.
Would it not?
I believe we prorated that. That's already prorated, I think, beginning April 1, so that it would have been prorated for a 9-month
okay.
period. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. Councillor Nielsen.
Through the chair to Paul. Your explanation of your conversation with the provincial government was dealing with the homeless circumstances and the extension there. But your operating business case talked about a role much broader than that. And I guess I'm concerned from some of the conversations I've heard from some of my colleagues that sit on various committees about how valuable they have been or how much action has come out of them, which is part of the role that this person would play in trying to facilitate those. And us not clearly identifying the city's complete role in dealing with the homeless issue. In the event that this position was not supported, what would that do to the various committees that they would be attempting to facilitate? And I'm asking the question, Paul, because I guess there's been some question about the viability and effectiveness of some of those committees.
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, great questions. Also, I'll open with that up until November of 2021, that most of the majority of that committee work was done on the side of city staff's desks. And so some of the committees that we've had, starting in the spring of 2021 with the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, and the beginning of 2021 with our Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. Those committees did not have the administrative support required to be in a place where they were doing well. And that's something we acknowledged and had brought forward in 2021 as a business case to bring this position, that if we were to stay in the business of operating those committees, that we would require dedicated staff time to do so. Since November of 2021, the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force we've worked with the committee, we've brought in subject matter experts, and I do believe that is functioning at a higher level now. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee and the work that is surrounding that. We did deviate in working with our partners in the region to try to make it more of a regional piece. That cost us some time, and I will take responsibility for that. I've had some conversations with the committee as well as a contractor to actually start moving forward on a community safety and well-being strategy as approved by council in the fall of 2020. And I feel confident that if we were to have a position dedicated to those efforts, that we would be able to have that strategy in place before the end of the year. Without the staffing resource, however, administration can no longer support the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, nor the Community Safety and Wellbeing Strategy, as we do not have dedicated staff time. And it has been shown historically, just it's not effective, this being the side of anybody's responsibility. In regards to the homeless issue, our Community Development Coordinator, as grant funded by the Government of Alberta, has been spending some time supporting various shelter committees. We currently have a winter shelter advisory board as well as a weekly shelter meeting with stakeholders. We've acknowledged that having both isn't as valuable as we initially had intended. However, if this position were to be approved, it is up to the discretion of council as to where we focus their efforts. And we are not currently in the business of running homeless shelters, and we are being grant funded to support them in their efforts. And so my position with the Government of Alberta is that if they want to continue funding the shelter in the community, that they also grant fund some staffing position to help offset our staff time there. So just to sum up, you are correct in that some of the committee work that we have been doing is not to the satisfaction or to the level of standard that I would expect, but that with a dedicated resource, we are able to meet that expectation, both for those two specific committees, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, as well as the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. Those are two committees that they're not just been approved by council, but you also have some funding that's been approved with it. And I believe that with a dedicated resource, we'll be able to continue those efforts as well as other focus areas as approved by council through discussions.
Thank you. Then the next question coming out of that, Paul, would be if either the government provided resource help to deal with the homeless issue, or they didn't, and council decided they were not going to invest in that direction, the role of this person you're requesting, how would that broaden beyond community safety and diversity task force? Because a good portion of that time would have been included in the homeless portion of the portfolio, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So how would that portfolio change to better meet the needs of the community?
Yeah, great question. And so through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, you're right. So that if the government said, you know, we're either council director or the government said we were done with the shelter, there would be some percentage of staff or capacity that would be open. And so what we've done is in positioning this is that we've moved the special events is an area of the organization that nobody is currently dedicated to focusing on or quarterbacking on behalf of city administration. And so we're recommending that this position would lead those efforts as it's very community focused, as well as currently grants to organizations lies within our legislative services portfolio, but we believe that this would better be suited here. So there is some capacity taken up through those efforts, as well as that we've noted in previous discussions with council the desire for, and these are examples of things that have come to the table, and there's been no direction, but just as an example, future art committees, heritage and culture. I think there was a discussion in January about healing gardens. Any of those types of efforts would be quarterbacked by this position, overseen and led by this position. Without a resource like this, those efforts would be extremely difficult internally to staff.
Okay.
If you're following up on that, otherwise I got Councillor Everly.
Oh, wait, thank you.
Councillor Everly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to talk to council, but Paul, you can jump in if you'd like. As you know, I've been struggling with it, and it's because I see the potential of the position. And I started to think, if I can think beyond the couple task forces that are on now, if they're moving forward, a community development coordinator, as Paul was speaking in the last portion of that, is necessary in this community. As a person who works with community groups, who works with the city's events, who does all of these things, we are struggling and we need help. So I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus with this. So I apologize to administration now if I do that. Is we had a Taste of Wetaskiwin meeting on Thursday and the subjects started to come up about Canada Day, and there's literally nobody who can even bring together a Canada Day event or commemoration, however we want to speak to it. There's lots of things coming out of council and there's nobody to help guide us. So the museum agreed to take the Canada Day thing on. And that's, again, pushing it down to other levels where we need that city help, not funding, because necessarily, I'm not saying don't fund these other groups, but sometimes it's just that person to sit and help direct, whether it's create the agendas, whether it's to facilitate the meeting time, whether it's to do some of these things, which in and of itself isn't adding more money, but it's helping bring the community together. And again, our third strategic direction was this building our community, and this is how we do it. So for what is a value price, I think of an extra staff member that can help with multiple things and help support multiple groups within our community. We're going to get more than the salary out of it, because then we're going to have these groups be able to come together and create more. As a whole, we can do more than individual pieces. So I will support it. I will continue to support it. And it is very necessary for our community. Thank you.
One of the reasons that I totally agree with you, I've definitely been a huge proponent for community events, especially working through our homeless. But I keep hearing that we can do more or we should do more. I think that if we don't get to a point where we're satisfied with the level of service, that we're going to continue to raise our own bar. And by doing so, we're going to continue to raise taxes. And I'm not getting a ton of feedback or push from the community to get more service. And I think we're our own worst enemy in terms of, we've got this great vision of what our community can look like because we can do more. Absolutely, we can. But I think that it's going to fall back into what it costs our community to do more. So maybe I'm not hearing from the same people that the rest of council is in terms of what we should be doing more of, or even what we should be doing the same level of. I got lots of pushback when we changed the hours of the recycling center, but that died down. People don't like change, period. They adapted, they got used to the hours of operation, and now it's operating just fine. And we were able to find some efficiencies and therefore able to reduce some of the costs in our community. And my focus then would be to find those efficiencies, to determine what level of service we want to offer the community, as opposed to coming up with ways that we can better serve our community. I think we serve our community fantastically. And I think we've got an amazing staff right now that do support our community, which makes it really hard not to support a full 4% cost of living increase for our staff. Because it's not that I don't think that they deserve it. I just don't think we can afford it. And that is why I've voted no on a number of things. It's not that I don't support the idea or that we can do it or should do it. It's that I don't think we can afford to do it. So while this is one of those positions, and especially something so community driven that I feel very strongly about, I still can't support it just based on what it's going to cost. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you. I'm really torn on this one personally because, like Karen or Councillor Aberley, I really believe it has potential to be a pretty magical thing. Having said that, I also worry about having it and creating that magical thing as the expectation on the part of the community is that, don't worry, the city's got staff that will look after it for us. And we don't have to go out and try and, as groups, find partners to work with, because, you know, that's the city's job to facilitate. So on the one hand, we are taking on a responsibility in many ways that the community will leave to us if we allow it to happen. So if this position is approved, then I think we've got to be really careful about how it is utilized so it doesn't become the community's crutch to solve problems. And I guess that would be the director's role going forward, general manager's role going forward, to ensure that it isn't used as a community crutch. So I don't know where I'm going to go with this one.
Councilor Billingsley.
Thank you. Kind of like the airport master plan, I asked the question is, you have the cost of the plan, but then you've got the cost of implementation. And I'm wondering about this as well, is then when you take on Canada Day or you take on whatever boards that they sit on and the expenditures that go along with it, are we willing to fund those different things as well? Or are we just the planner? And this is the financial commitment to it, because if they take on other things, there's costs involved. And if we're not prepared to spend those monies as well, then there's no point in having this position.
Councilor Everly.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councilors Nielsen and Billingsley, I agree with everything that both of you said, and I think we're actually on the same page of, I don't think it needs to cost an extra, and I think that it doesn't have to be asking the city to do everything. I know in the past there has been problems that we might be, I'm trying really hard, that we might be weary of past things that have happened with the city. What I can say from the community groups is, even, and I'll bring it up as Canada Day, there was not necessarily an anticipation there of more money, but of the groups of us that get together and who can help facilitate. And by facilitate, I purely mean facilitating the planning, the organization, the minutes. We are lucky at the museum because we are full-time and we can put the work into it, but so many groups we work with are nonprofit, volunteer-led, that need the extra, need that extra support. So I would agree, put into it that it's not a budget line above. There is not a all community events, therefore we're putting another $100,000 into those community events, but somebody that will work with the various grassroots projects that spring up, as Paul said, and continue with things that we do find necessary as part of this being a place we want to live and work in and have people move. And it's more than a lot of the money that we're spending on. We all know why we love to live here, and I'm scared of losing that as we lose social groups, and wanting to see us as a unit step up to that. So I agree, but I'm still fully supporting this funding going to the sort of more second half of the business case as was put forward. Thank you.
Councilor Blatz.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm having the same moral issue with this position as what Mayor Gandam was speaking to, is that I see the value in the words that Councillor Averly has been talking about with this position, and I have previously fought for this position as well. I think it's really valuable to our community, as well as making sure that we're having efficient groups in our community. However, I don't think that now is the time for this position. And unfortunately, I think that we just can't afford it. We don't have the money right now to fund this position. We're looking still at a 9% tax increase, even with the reductions that we've done so far. And I would love to see this position come up at a later year when we have the money to do this. But as we sit right now, I can't see us being able to fund this position, and I am not in favor of it.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you, sir. As myself and Councillor Blatt sit on the Inclusiveness and Diversity Committee, and honestly, I can say we got off to a fairly slow start. We didn't really have the right direction as to which way we were going. Since we have some other people come on board, and we're working with different community groups right now to get different messages out there. And I think we are gaining a lot more traction to be able to really help the community on our own. I think this is a very valuable position, but with what Councillor Blatt said, where we're sitting right now, I just don't think we can afford it. Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Contrary to some of what you've heard, I also hear, why aren't we doing that? Why don't we do that? Camrose is doing that. Panoka is doing this. There are different events that they have, and we aren't participating. Things like a winter festival or fireworks or Communities in Bloom this year, or a parade or a round dance. There were events that have been planned, and the city was part of the facilitation process. I think with what's happening with inflation, the war in Ukraine, coming out of a pandemic and things, I would say just the opposite. This is the time that we need something like this to get rid of the negativity that's in the world, but also the negativity in our own community. We need to build positives, and that's part of what our strat plan was about too, was communicating with people and developing a positive attitude towards our community. Paul has been overloaded with this and hasn't been able to fully dedicate 100% to his position that he was hired for because of all of this being on his plate. And whether it's on his plate or off his plate, I think it's still going to be on his mind. And I think if we have a person to take this off his mind, you will see something happen in our community that's positive. So I'm in favor of this. I'm not in favor of the tax increase the same as everybody else, but I really feel this person is relevant to what's happening in our city. Thank you.
Anything else? Red plate, green plate? It's defeated. This, and I'll speak for council now, is that defeating this motion does not mean that this now falls on Paul's plate. We're deciding whether or not it's a priority or where it lies within our priority. And because there isn't a person to be able to do it, doesn't mean that it now falls on your plate to make sure that that happens.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yeah.
As I understand it, so with not approval of the position, right? What I'm hearing from council is we are not in that business. And so there will be, in speaking with the CAO, we will probably most likely have to come back to council to give some money back. And we'll proceed that way prior to engaging the committees on what this means. But as I understand it as an administrator, we will start moving now towards the path of just shutting this stuff down.
Yeah, things that you don't have the capacity for. Yeah, absolutely. Fire Services Master Plan. Discussion?
Your worship,
Yes.
this is one, again, it's a one-time event. So if council wanted to fund it from the fire reserve, that is an option.
Okay, we'll talk about where it's coming from before we approve it.
Okay.
The amount of money in the fire reserve is?
$644,891.
And if I'm correct, and I may not be, the fire reserve was set up primarily for
Apparatus replacement.
apparatus and replacement, yeah, like a ladder truck.
Go ahead, Councilor Billingsley.
When you say primarily, has it been identified exactly what that reserve was for?
Do you have a?
I've got
is?
the department or the fire department. The purpose is to provide funds primarily for the purchase of new fire trucks and equipment or for major repairs to existing units.
Thank you.
So is that primarily wording in there, the loophole?
It's entirely up to council. These are your reserves, and you can have a qualifying statement to every one of them or as council deems appropriate, right?
Councilor Aberley.
Thank you. Through the chair to council, I would argue that having a master plan that would include equipment needs coming out of something that is primarily for equipment falls within the semantics of that. Thank you.
So does primarily.
Primarily.
Anything further? Okay, so now it's on funding first, and then we'll, okay. So coming from the fire reserve. Speaking to the plan. Nothing? Red plate, green plate? Firefighter mental health wellness. Administration will come back on the scope of it.
To the mayor, prior to implementing, we will come back to council. Absolutely.
Anything further? Yeah, go ahead.
So we've identified that this is important, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to get that lost. We're just talking now about whether.
We're approving the funding now for the budget, and then administration is going to come back with the details on it. And we've given them our priority on what that.
And then we will vote at that point of either if it comes out of a health spending account or self-administered. Is that correct?
That'll be part of the information that administration brings back. So
we would have that decision to make at a later time of where it comes from.
Internal or external?
no, if whether it's a health spending account or, yeah, managed by Sun Life, or if it's, or yes, yeah, managed by Sun Life, or if it's handled internally.
But I thought we'd already established that we wanted it, a focus on it as opposed to wide open.
Yep, that's
Right.
also coming back. They're
So-
gonna come back. So right now, they're coming back with whether or not Sun Life can narrow their scope.
Great.
And if they can't, then it would have to be handled internally. Yeah. But if they can, then whether or not we do it internally or not
No
is,
discussion.
yeah.
Yep.
So right now, it's on the funding to make sure that that's part of the budget. Red plate, green plate. E-ticketing. Any discussion? Red plate, green plate. Reduction to FCS funding, sorry.
Sorry, these are now strategies that Diana can discuss with council on how to potentially reduce the tax burden. She's got a couple of different ideas.
So before we go to that, the $15,000 credit that you're showing there, where's that coming from?
We would have to get it from a reserve. Yeah,
Okay,
because
so
that was
before we
this.
leave the e-ticketing?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Because there was 6,000 that was ongoing in the tax base, and then the other 15 would need to come from one of the reserves.
So then that would then be the funding strategy, whether it's added to taxes or
Or funded
from a reserve.
partially from the reserve?
Okay, so you want a decision on that then, obviously? Okay,
Yes.
So for the e-ticketing, the 15,000, you want to come from reserve or included in our taxes? So I'll go reserve first, red plate, green plate.
Which reserve?
Contingency.
Does that cover that one off then?
Yes.
Okay. And the reduction in FCSS funding.
Correct. As Paul can indicate, after discussions with the government of Alberta, because of the significant surpluses that FCSS currently has, the province of Alberta is not going to be giving them this year's allotment. And they felt that it would not be inappropriate for the city not to include the 84,300 as well.
To the mayor, just a point of clarification, they're just withholding April's allotment until we come back to them with a spending plan and can justify how we're going to spend the rest of the money.
The surplus.
Yeah,
Or are they actually saying as well, the current year?
they haven't made a decision on the surplus, and they're only withholding April's payment out of the entire allotment for 2022. But it's a to be determined discussion with them as we better understand how FCSS is planning to spend the dollars.
So if they had no provincial funding, the city wouldn't give their funding, but they make it through 2022. They're flush, like they're fully accounted for. All of the programming is done. All of the money is spent. 2023, we would then be back on the hook for the 20%. So there would be that increase to 2023's budget for 84.3 or whatever the allocation of provincial funding would be.
Through the mayor, if I understand it correctly, once the surplus is gone, like we have to provide our 20%, right? So as long as the government of Alberta is choosing to provide their dollars, we need to ensure we're providing the 20%. So, and right now their estimated surplus for 2020 is about $185,000, and they're projecting another surplus of another 100,000 for 2021, but that's yet to be finalized because our year end is still in progress.
So I think I would be more comfortable with still having that 84.3 in the budget. And then whether that goes to a stabilization reserve or that goes to a stabilization reserve, because eventually we're gonna have to be back to paying the 20% of whatever FCSS is getting from the province. I would hate to lose that now and then have to add it later on. Go ahead.
And I'm in total agreement with that because of, it's not like FCSS is going to be closing their doors in 3 years or whatever it is. And we don't have a final decision on the government of knowing exactly what's going to happen as far as not surpluses.
Allocation.
So yeah, I'm in total of just putting the money aside and see what happens.
Anything else? So this is red plate, green plate. If you go green plate, you're in favor of taking that out of the budget.
Taking it out.
Yeah. So if you don't want to take it out and you want to keep it status quo, you will vote against it.
So just be clear, it's staying in.
Staying in,
Thank you.
yes. Because you can't have a negative, or you
Yeah,
shouldn't have a
no,
negative.
I just wanted to be
motion.
clear that all of a sudden it didn't disappear from the sheet.
So one of the things that we've talked about since we began budget deliberations is the potential to increase your franchise fee. There is the option for council to implement an increase in a franchise fee mid-year. If you wanted to implement an increase of 1% in the franchise fee effective July 1st of 2022, that would be an approximate increase in franchise fee revenue of $85,000, and that's in your electrical franchise fee.
So if that's starting halfway through the year, 2023 would be 170.
Correct. And again, as I had indicated previously, when you're looking at positions or costs that are ongoing, that this is, you know, an ongoing revenue source is a good way to fund them.
Go ahead. And then I got Councillor Blatz.
I will not support that, knowing what's going on with everybody's utility bills going on and people being able to afford it, adding on another 1%. is not going to be very palatable to many people in our community. I think that we need to find other efficiencies within the organization before we add a 1% to people's utility bill.
Councillor Blatz.
Yeah, similar to what Councillor Billingsley said. With everything going on with everybody's electrical bills right now, I don't see how adding a franchise fee would actually decrease the burden that's on people right now. So I don't see that as being a feasible option.
Council worked hard a couple of years ago to actually reduce the franchise fees. I don't think that being on a yo-yo is great either.
It's okay for us to be the yo-yo, but not the
Wow.
franchise fees.
If all they're calling me is a yo-yo, it's a good day. Anything further? To the addition of the franchise fee.
And as indicated earlier, there is an estimate of a deficit in the solid waste and recycling utility. And if council chose to have that particular utility to be self-supporting, there's $100,000 that would be funded from utility rate increases. And this is in the garbage. So in terms of the 121 liter size, the annual impact would be $19.44. For the 242 liter size, the annual impact would be $38.88. And for the 363 liter size, the annual impact would be $58.44.
Councillor Billingsley.
When was the last time we've increased the rates on garbage?
2019.
Do you know what, I guess I could do the math myself. Do you know what the percentage increase this is on a monthly bill to a, I guess it's $19 to from.
Oh.
Yeah, but
How much per
percentage wise.
month? Just 1 second.
Like,
Kathy.
Through to the committee, it is a 7.5% increase.
you said 2019, correct?
Yes. And it's $1.62 per month for the 121 liter size.
That seems like a reasonable, since considering we're going back to 2019 since our last increase. My opinion.
Councillor Nelson.
Through the chair to Kathy or to Sue, what savings, what financial savings would there be if we went to twice monthly garbage pickup?
Through the mayor to Councillor Nielsen, it would be an approximate savings of $78,000.
How much?
$78,000. That would basically be running the truck half the time, right? So it'd be about that, give or take.
Thank you. Just the truck, but what happens to that employee? That, would they be repurposed in some other way?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley. So yes, that person would likely be stationed either at the landfill, recycling depot, doing other things within the city.
So it doesn't change the staffing costs, just the operational vehicle.
Correct.
And how much to have the recycling center unpersoned?
I believe it'll be about $60,000 per year.
Did you say 60?
Correct.
Mr. Mayor, I have seen what happens sometimes when our crew there take lunch break and come back after lunch and see what has happened. So to have the recycling center unpersoned, I think would be catastrophic. People just throw things, the cardboard is all over the place and it's really quite a mess.
How come it only happens when you're there?
Pardon me?
How come it only happens when you're there?
Related to the cost of the garbage bins, I think with the increase, I know I have neighbors who have like the second size, and there's a two-person family. And I really think that people might rethink, first of all, but I think it might also encourage recycling. We have a lot of people who don't recycle. Again, sorry, but I do go out to landfill once in a while. And when I see the trucks dump what they're dumping and the cardboard boxes and those kinds of things that are coming out of our garbage trucks, it's just, that could all be recycled. So, and then maybe we wouldn't have to subsidize quite as much either. So I think we need to, and I said this before, we need to educate people about recycling. And we need to encourage recycling as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Everly.
Thank you. Through the chair to council, this discussion is actually worrying me a little bit. I know many families who have the large bins and they don't think that those are large enough to begin with. And I could not agree more that we need to educate people on recycling, but we also need to make recycling, what am I trying to say, easier, for lack of a better word. In other communities where we see garbage pickup being reduced, they have better recycling, curbside recycling, composting, things like that. I personally, I know the time, as an example, thank God I have a husband that goes to recycling, because my house would be full of recycling. I don't have time in those recycling hours, and they're great, but my hours, the way I work in that, it just, I can see this as being one of the things that could be an issue. So I'm not against bi-weekly pickup, but as it sits currently, I am, because I think we need to add a service through the recycling to be teaching people that way, because I don't think personally, for me, our recycling isn't convenient for people who are working multiple jobs and / or single parents and / or people who don't have the same mobility issues that I do. And I would rather see a slight increase to charging of garbage can sizes than changing this service altogether. Yeah, I'm concerned. Thank you.
So if we change we're not subsidizing the solid waste or the garbage pickup rates, that's $100,000 back on the savings rate. I would support that before I went to bi-weekly, but not that bi-weekly is out of the question eventually. Go ahead, Councillor Billingsley, or sorry, Councillor Elliott. That's twice now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, but we divert somewhere between 55 and 60% from our landfill with recycling in Wetaskiwin, and we're one of the higher in the province, are we not?
Through the chair to Councillor Elliott, I actually don't have those specific numbers, but we are definitely not diverting that much waste from landfill.
Okay, at one time we were, because they were actually making commercials about our recycling about in Wetaskiwin. So, and my biggest problem is somebody can, number one, you can help your neighbors, just like we have people who help shovel walks or cut grass. We could help people take their recycling, but somebody comes home with a television set in a cardboard box. They can put that cardboard box in their vehicle to take that TV home, but they can't put that cardboard box back in their vehicle to take it to recycling. I find that somewhat frustrating. Thank you.
When I bought my TV, I had the proprietor said outlet, deliver that TV for me. He refused to take the cardboard back. Counselor.
That must have been a few years ago and the store was in the mall.
Counselor Aberly.
Thank you, Mayor Gandam, and through the chair to Councillor Elliott, with all due respect, those are people who have vehicles. And there is a large percentage of our population that do not have vehicles, cannot make it to these areas. And again, I'm bringing we can educate on recycling all we want. Some people can't, some people are lazy. We need to make it as easy as possible for people who are getting their stuff delivered, getting all of this go in, is make the garbage cost what it costs and raise those things up. And we talk recycling separate from this, because bi-weekly, trust me, it is not going to go over well in this community with the number of single parent households that we have. And they already complained to me about their garbage. You would not believe how many people dump things outside my garbage bin, even downtown. So I subsidize, as the owner operator of a business, people's garbage. This conversation, again, it's worrisome to me.
Mr. Mayor, I was only talking to recycling. I was not talking about twice weekly pickup or every second week pickup. I'm not in favor of that either right now.
Okay, in favor of the garbage rates increased so that they are no longer subsidized by taxes. Red plate, green plate. Did I miss anything, Diana?
No, I just saved it, Karen. I just saved it, so if you wanted to pull up. Oh, okay. Okay, did that work? Did it work, Karen? Yeah, there's the last one with the 100,000. Yeah, that's fine. So as projected on the screen at this point, with the discussions that have happened to this point, we're looking at a 7.34% tax increase. One of the other options, which is the purpose of the stabilization reserve, would have been for council to consider funding 1 or 2% of taxes from stabilization. Again, that's entirely up to council if that's your decision. And other than that, I don't have any further options.
But if we put 1 or 2% coming from stabilization, it just means next year we have to add it.
It does have an impact, yes,
Okay.
going forward, you bet. Yeah.
Councillor Nielsen.
the one, like I have a lot of trouble with the 7, whatever number you came up with there,
0.34.
7.34. But one of the things we have not talked about is cuts. Cuts in our operation. Maybe downsizing some staff. And I can't as a counselor address any of those because staff are not in my purview to do. I think through this budget process, we've indicated to our administration what we support. But at the end of the day, supporting 7% is, in my opinion, unpalatable given the circumstances that everybody's surrounded with right now from an economic perspective. And I would like to see administration be directed to go find a number, 4%. Recognizing that we supported all these things, where do they really fit in the organizational scheme of making the city work? Could it be that at the end of the day, Sue and her staff would say, you know what? If I'm asked to find 4%, I know council has supported the e-procurement program, but I administratively will trade off the e-procurement program for this because it's more important to the operation of the city. So I think we have 2 choices before us, well, 3. 1, we accept a 7% tax increase and go sell it to the public. We decide where cuts have to be made, but I have no idea on the operational side where those cuts can occur because I don't work in that domain. Or we give that responsibility back to Sue and administration and say, find X% that's palatable for us to go forward. Recognizing we're not saying drop any of these. We're saying we support them all. What's the most important and valuable to the community from an administrative operational perspective? And I believe we may have some efficiencies in staffing that can be found. But I'm only speculating because I don't work in that domain. But I suspect if Sue had to find 4% with her staff, they would set their priorities pretty quickly.
Councillor Billingsley.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Nielsen on your assessment as far as we've added a whole lot, but we really haven't taken anything away. On the first day, I made some suggestions or comments about like the radios but that was never taken out of the budget. The maintenance of the radios. That $21,000 was still, unless that was pulled out of here, but I don't think that it has been. And I'm just wondering, is there other things in there? So I'm thinking that there probably is some efficiencies that could be found because we didn't cut it a darn thing. So I'd like to make a motion. I move to direct administration to find efficiency in the organization to reflect a 3% tax increase to be brought forward.
3% tax decrease.
No, total of 3% instead of 7.34 to be brought forward with options. March, when was that meeting, Sue? at the March 28th council meeting.
Yep, Sue.
Through the chair, could I get clarification that that does not, that the total 3% does not include the 1.5% tax equivalent for the reserves, that the previous motion? So that technically it would be a 4.5% tax increase?
1.5% from, sorry, which one are you speaking of?
It doesn't include that.
We didn't,
They didn't pass
that wasn't
Oh,
passed.
okay, good. Perfect.
Maybe it should have.
Comments, questions?
Your worship. Just in terms of budget preparation, the 2022 budget was prepared with the foundation of the same level of service. With the 3%, I appreciate where council is coming from, but can council tell us where we should be cutting services? Because we are a organization that basic function is to provide services. We have established the budget at the level of service that council has approved throughout many budget processes. So if we're looking to cut as well as find efficiencies, then we would like some input from council as to which level of services they would like us to potentially focus on.
And I'll speak to that if I could. Councilor Nielsen also said nobody knows the organization better than the city manager. And I think that in my motion, I had said that to bring back options. So then at that point, we can, I mean, you can see, and some of this may hurt. But we're in a world of hurt at 7.34. So what's more palatable to the community? World of hurt at City Hall or world of hurt on their tax bill at the end of the year? Either way, it's no fun, but tough decisions that have to be made.
I don't think that's fair to put back on administration to not have some ideas of what levels of service council is willing to cut. As you say, that administration knows the organization better than council. Council should know the community better than administration. So if there's a substantial cut to taxes or to what's being proposed, then that absolutely should be coming from council as well. That's not fair to put back on administration. We're facing an increase from provincial and federal government downloads, increase to salaries with the RCMP, the biological casework analysis, things like that, that we don't have any control over. So you're essentially asking administration to come back with a cut to taxes. And so over the last 2 years, we've had a 0% and a decrease of 2.41%, which has been done through the work of administration and through the work of council. So now if you're wanting our administration to come back with a cut to taxes, then I think that it's unfair for a council to direct administration to come back with that without any input from council if you're looking at levels of service cuts. I won't support this motion based partially on that. And after going through and saying to administration, these things are important to council because we approved it. Now, you guys decide what it is that's important and what's not important. And I don't mean it because everything I feel was important. I could absolutely support anything that was presented to council, but I don't think that's fair to be put back on administration to go through 3 days of budget deliberations approve a number of business cases and then ask administration to decide what's most important. We're the ones who are setting the level of service for the community. If you want that kind of cut, then I suggest you come up with some ideas on what that's going to look like. Councilor Nielsen.
I need some clarity in what I can present for cuts. So I would like to go in camera at this time.
Sure.
Thank
Moved
you.
by Councilor Nielsen.
And I've asked Sue to stay, please.
Those in favor? Carried. Need a motion to come out of camera. Councilor Lonsdale, those in favor? Carried. Kathy still with us? Perfect. Motion on the floor. Any further discussion? We're ready for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. What else did we have to wrap up? Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Just to clarify, could you, Mr. Mayor, the tax increase would be
3%.
3%? Is that what your motion was?
Councilor Billington. Moved by Councilor
Just
Billington. Those in favor?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just a point of privilege, please. I would like to thank staff particularly and council, but staff particularly for giving up a Sunday, for doing this with us. And I really appreciate the fact. And I'd like to wish Councilor Aberley much success on her surgery tomorrow. Wish you well, and we won't have to yell at you anymore. So. Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks for taking my speech after council's adjourned.
Well, you never recognize me anyway, so.
I appreciate that. Those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, staff, for coming in on a Sunday. I really appreciate you spending your time here.